Chapter 4:26. The heart-wrenching woman did not notice the abnormality in Jian Chen's expression. She continued to cry bitterly. "Young master, I'm begging you. I'm begging you. You have to save my third son. He's my only son. If anything happens to him, I don't want to live either." The lady boss was just an ordinary person without any background. She couldn't afford to offend a powerful force like Yang Jizong. Now, she placed all her hopes on Jianqin. This was because she knew that since Jianqin wasn't afraid of Yang Jizong, he must have an extraordinary background. Jianqin's hands tightly grasped the lady boss's shoulders. His eyes were filled with urgency and hope as he looked at the lady boss. He hurriedly said, "What did you just say? Kendall? Which Kendall are you talking about? Could it be that you and your son are Uncle Kendall's family?" Jianqin's body trembled slightly. His expression was extremely excited. He had never been this excited before. Uncle Kendall's family had always been his concern. He had been troubled by this matter countless times. Over time, this matter had almost become a sore point for Jianqin. Now that there was finally some news about Uncle Kendall's family, how could Jianqin not be excited? The lady boss finally reacted at this time. She reached out and wiped the tears on her face. She looked suspiciously at Jianqin and asked, "Young master, could it be that you know our Kendall?" "Kendall is my husband. He's my third son's father." Jianqin took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. Then he slowly closed his eyes. He couldn't help but recall Uncle Kendall's face in his mind. Then he slowly raised his hands. All of a sudden, the yuan qi between heaven and earth surged wildly. Streams of colorful light visible to the naked eye quickly gathered between Jianqin's hands. The whole inn was filled with a layer of surging yuan qi. Looking at the light that suddenly appeared in Jianqin's hands like magic, the innkeeper was an ordinary person who had never seen such a scene before. She was immediately stunned. Her eyes stared at the colorful light that gathered in Jianqin's hands, entranced. Not long after, a face floated in front of Jianqin. Jianqin used his powerful will to control the qi of heaven and earth, using the qi of heaven and earth to draw Uncle Kendall's face according to the memories in his mind. Jianqin opened his eyes and looked at the inn's lady boss. Just as he was about to ask, the inn's lady boss exclaimed, "Kendall, this is Kendall." "Young master, have you seen my Kendall before?" The inn's lady boss was very excited. Her face was filled with surprise. Kendall had been gone for many years without any news. She had been worried about him for a long time. Seeing the inn's lady boss recognize Uncle Kendall, Jianqin finally confirmed the identity of the mother and son. He was so excited that he could not control himself. With a trembling voice, he asked, and to look carefully, "Is this person really your husband? It can't be wrong, it can't be wrong. He is Kendall, he is Kendall. Young master, have you seen Kendall before? Where did he go? Why did he not come back after so many years? How could he be so cruel and leave us here to depend on each other for so many years?" The inn's lady boss's eyes were filled with tears. Jianqin's attitude toward the inn's lady boss suddenly changed. He quickly held the inn's lady boss and said with concern, "Auntie, sit down first. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" Jianqin also changed the way he addressed the lady boss. Looking at the footprints all over the lady boss's clothes, a surge of anger rose in Jianqin's heart. Now that he knew that the landlady before him was Uncle Kendall's family that he had been searching for, Jianqin would never allow them to be bullied or mistreated. "Young master, have you seen our Kendall? Where did he go? Why did he not come back after so long?" The inn's lady boss missed Kendall very much. She kept asking Jianqin about Kendall. Jianqin's expression changed slightly. He stuttered, not knowing how to explain. When they were hunted down by the golden-haired Tiger King in the Magic Beast Mountain Range, Uncle Kendall died in order to save him. He had already left this world a few years ago. Not even his bones were left behind. After hesitating slightly, Jianchen immediately changed the topic. He said, "Auntie, let's talk about this later. Right now, let's hurry up and save Sanzi." Okay. Save Sanzi first. Sanzi is my only son. Nothing can happen to him. Young master, I beg you, please save my Sanzi," the lady boss pleaded. She had placed all her hopes on Jianchen. Jianchen's expression became serious. He said, "Auntie, where's Sanzi right now? I'll take you to him right now." "Sanzi has been taken away by Yang Jizong's people. I don't know where he is right now," the lady boss sobbed. Jianchen pondered for a moment. He said, "Auntie, let's go find Yang Jizong's people first. It's been such a short time. Maybe they haven't left this place yet." After saying that, Jianchen pulled the lady boss and walked outside. Seeing that Jianchen was willing to help her, the lady boss's face became wild with joy. However, when she saw that Jianchen was alone, her expression couldn't help but become hesitant. She said, "Young master, Yang Jizong is a big sect in the Qiangan kingdom. They have a lot of people. We should find some helpers." Jianchen smiled and said, "Auntie, don't worry. I will definitely save Sanzi. You should come with me." After saying that, Jianchen pulled the lady boss's sleeve and walked out. "Wait a minute. I will close the door of the inn." Yang Jizong had a great reputation in the Qiangan kingdom. Wherever Yang Jizong's people stayed, almost everyone knew about them. It had been less than 2 hours since Sanzi was captured. Yang Jizong's people hadn't left the city yet. Jianchen casually asked around on the streets and knew where Yang Jizong's people were now. Jianchen took the lady boss directly to the place where Yang Jizong's people were temporarily staying. Along the way, they passed through 3 streets and arrived at the largest luxurious inn in the city. "Guest, do you want to stay or have a meal?" As soon as they entered the inn, the waiter then greeted them with a warm face, but his eyes were full of curiosity as he looked at the lady boss, who was covered in footprints and looked very embarrassed. His eyes flickered, and he didn't know whether to drive her out or not, because with the lady boss's appearance, she was not qualified to enter this place at all. Jianchen ignored the waiter. He spread out his divine sense and covered the entire inn. Soon, he found a group of people suspected to be Yang Jizong's people, and then walked directly over with the lady boss. "Guest, what can I do for you?" The waiter immediately followed and surrounded Jianchen, nodding and bowing. Jianchen threw a gold coin to the waiter and said, "There's nothing for you to do here. Go do what you need to do." Yang Jizong's people were staying in a small independent courtyard at the back of the inn. Jianchen walked through a door inside the inn to the independent courtyard, but just as he reached the door, 2 middle-aged men guarding the door stopped him. "Sir, this is the place of our Yang Jizong. Without an invitation, no one is allowed to enter." One of the middle-aged men expressionlessly said, "Yang Jizong, I'm looking for you." A cold light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. The energy of the world instantly gathered in his hand, and then he slapped the chests of the 2 middle-aged men with lightning speed. The 2 middle-aged men were only Saint Masters. In front of Jianchen, who was a heaven Saint Master, they were as weak as ants. They had no power to fight back at all. The 2 of them both spat out a mouthful of blood and were sent flying. They flew over 10 meters before landing on the ground. "Auntie, let's go in." Jianchen called out to the owner of the inn and strode in. The owner of the inn followed behind Jianchen in fear. The way she looked at Jianchen had also changed. She never thought that this young man, who seemed to be around the same age as her son, would be so powerful. He could send Yang Jizong's 2 powerful men to the ground with a flip of his hand. "How dare you? Who's causing trouble here?" Just as Jianchen entered, a loud shout rang out. Following that, several dozen people in the same uniform rushed out of the various rooms in the courtyard. They stared at Jianchen and the owner of the inn with extremely sharp gazes. Jianchen indifferently glanced at the group of people. The corner of his mouth curled up in disdain. However, the owner of the inn behind him could not maintain his composure. She could not help but lower her head under the several dozen sharp gazes. Her face was filled with fear, not daring to meet the eyes of the people in front of her. "Brat, who are you? Why have you barged into the territory of Yangjizong?" A middle-aged man who seemed to be the leader shouted at Jianqin. His gaze was extremely sharp. Jianqin slowly crossed his arms in front of his chest. His expression was calm. The white tiger that he had brought with him was quietly lying on Jianqin's shoulder. It was very well behaved, its pair of bright eyes constantly looking around. "Call your leader out for me," Jianqin said expressionlessly. His tone was cold and emotionless. The middle-aged man flew into a rage and sternly shouted, "How presumptuous! Brat, who do you think you are? How dare you speak to us like that? You're simply not putting our Yangjizong in your eyes. Arrest him and wait for the young master and third martial uncle to deal with him." "Yes," the crowd responded in unison. Immediately, more than 20 people took out their holy weapons and aggressively rushed towards Jianqin. Jianqin coldly snorted. On a small tree not far away, more than 20 leaves fell one after another. They turned into streaks of green light and shot towards the people who were rushing over. At this moment, the originally fragile leaves seemed to have turned into sharp pieces of iron in an instant. They slashed the throats of the 20 or so people who were rushing over. Chapter 4:27. Jianqin's method shocked the rest of the Yangjizong people. Looking at the 20 or so people lying on the ground with blood flowing out of their throats, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. They were secretly glad that they did not rush forward. Otherwise, they would be lying on the ground now. The way the Yangjizong people looked at Jianqin changed. There was an unconcealable fear in their eyes. Although Jianqin was much younger than them, the way he killed the 20 or so people shocked everyone. "Your Excellency, who are you?" The middle-aged man who spoke earlier shouted sternly. He had changed the way he addressed Jianqin from kid to "Your Excellency." "Call out the people who are in charge here immediately. Otherwise, I will kill all of you," Jianqin said coldly with an expressionless face. "You." The middle-aged leader was very angry. Yangjizong had a very high status in the Qiangan kingdom. Even the princes of the kingdom did not dare to treat them with such an attitude. Jianqin's contemptuous attitude obviously showed that he did not put Yangjizong in his eyes. This made the leader's heart burn with anger. However, he did not dare to act out because of Jianqin's strong strength. What happened? Who is making trouble here? At this moment, a deep voice came from behind. A man with long hair and black clothes walked out of a house. The man had a resolute expression and looked to be in his 50s. His bright eyes flashed with light from time to time. "Third martial uncle! Third martial uncle!" As soon as they saw this man, the disciples of Yangjizong bowed respectfully. The arrival of the third martial uncle gave the middle-aged man confidence. He said, "Third martial uncle, you came at the right time. Quickly arrest this boy. Not only did he make trouble here, but he also killed more than 20 disciples of Yangjizong. This is simply unforgivable." The third martial uncle did not pay attention to the middle-aged man's words. He stared sharply at Jianqin and carefully sized him up. His expression slowly became serious. Although Jianqin looked like he was in his 20s, the third martial uncle could see that he was extraordinary at a glance. He was definitely not an ordinary person. "Your Excellency, who are you? Why are you against Yangjizong?" the third martial uncle asked in a deep voice. His expression was not very good. "Third martial uncle, why are you talking so much nonsense with him? More than 20 disciples of Yangjizong died at his hands. We must not let him off easily." The middle-aged man standing next to the third martial uncle gnashed his teeth and said, with the third martial uncle present, his confidence was boosted. The third martial uncle raised his hand to stop the middle-aged man. His sharp eyes were still looking at Jianqin, waiting for Jianqin's answer. Jianqin crossed his arms in front of his chest, and looked calm. He did not put the third martial uncle in his eyes. Only the lady boss, who was standing behind him, trembled and hid behind him. She did not dare to say a word. This morning, your Yangji Zong people captured a person. Release him immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude to you. Jianqin said in a deep voice. His tone became fierce as he spoke. The third martial uncle's expression suddenly changed when he heard Jianqin's words. His eyes became cold as he said in a deep voice, "Sir, do you know what the consequences of your words will be? Our Yangjizong is not a sect that anyone can offend. I don't care what sect you are from. Release him immediately and kneel down to apologize. Otherwise, none of you will leave here alive today." Jianqin shouted. The person who was captured was Uncle Kendall's son. This matter would not be settled so easily. Arrogant, no matter how good the third martial uncle's temper was, he was still enraged. He said in a deep voice, "You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Then let me see what kind of ability you have." As soon as he finished speaking, a light blue scimitar appeared in the third martial uncle's hand. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and quickly shot towards Jianqin. Jianqin coldly snorted and revealed a disdainful sneer. His fingers moved slightly, and an azure sword chi shot out from between his fingers, shooting towards the third martial uncle. Ding! With a crisp sound, the azure and violet sword chi accurately struck the third martial uncle's scimitar. The finger-sized azure and violet sword chi contained an unimaginable amount of power, causing the third martial uncle's charging body to come to a stop. Afterwards, his body was pushed back in the air. When his feet landed on the ground, he still uncontrollably took a few steps back. The third martial uncle stabilized himself with great difficulty, but his expression had already become extremely ugly. He looked at Jianqin in disbelief. He was unable to accept this reality. With his strength as an Earth Saint Master, he was actually unable to block a casual sword chi. After a while, the third martial uncle seemed to realize something. He looked at Jianqin in disbelief and cried out in a trembling voice, You're a Heaven Saint Master." Hearing this, the faces of the Yangji Zong people all changed. They all looked at Jianqin in disbelief. Their faces were filled with shock. "I'll count to 3. If I still don't see him, then none of you will be able to live," Jianqin coldly said. His gaze was extremely cold. He had already lost his patience. "Quick, go and bring him out for me." This time, the third martial uncle did not dare to be stubborn. Before Jianqin had even finished speaking, he had already given the order. The people from the Yangji sect were no longer as arrogant as before. They all looked at Jianqin with fearful gazes. As soon as they heard the third martial uncle's words, a few of them immediately ran off. Very soon, a person covered in blood was carried out by the Yangji Zong people. His hair was disheveled and his body was covered in vicious wounds. Clearly, he had been whipped. Even his clothes had been torn to shreds. The owner of the inn, who had been standing behind Jianqin the entire time, immediately cried out when she saw the person covered in blood. She did not know where she found the courage, but she quickly rushed out from behind Jianqin and arrived in front of the young man who had been carried out. She wailed, Sanzi, my Sanzi, why have you been beaten like this?" "My poor Sanzi." The third martial uncle's expression became somewhat ugly when he saw Sanzi beaten to such a state. Previously, he did not know that a waiter of the inn had the support of a Heaven Saint Master, so he did not stop his subordinates. Now that Sanzi had been beaten to such a state, he did not know whether he would vent his anger on Jianqin. He immediately became somewhat uneasy. The young men of Yangji Zong slowly put Sanzi down. Then they looked at Jianqin in fear and silently walked back. Jianqin arrived in front of Sanzi with a gloomy face. He crouched down to check on Sanzi's injuries. Suddenly, a powerful killing intent erupted from Jianqin, enveloping the entire courtyard. Jianqin's gaze suddenly became extremely sharp. A powerful killing intent soared into the sky as he shouted, "Yang Jizong, I, Jianqin, will destroy you." Chapter 428. Hearing Jianqin's declaration that he would destroy Yang Jizong, the expressions of the people in the courtyard all changed. Their faces became extremely ugly, and a trace of anger appeared in their eyes. Even though Jianqin's strength was very strong and made all of Yang Jizong's people fear him, the third martial uncle still couldn't help but shout, "Sir, I, Yang Jizong, am deeply rooted in the Qiangan kingdom. My strength is only below the imperial family. Have you thought about the consequences of your words? All of you die." The killing intent in Jianqin's eyes skyrocketed. Suddenly, all of the small trees in the courtyard exploded, filling the air with faint purple and green sword qi. They then shot towards Yang Jizong's people with lightning speed. Among Yang Jizong's people, only the third martial uncle was an Earth Saint Master. The rest of them were all Great Saint Masters or below. How could they block an attack that could make a Heaven Saint Master suffer? Without any resistance, they were riddled with holes and died. In front of such an attack, even the third martial uncle, who was an Earth Saint Master, was unable to block it. The wooden shavings imbued with azure and violet sword qi broke through his Saint Force defenses effortlessly, instantly creating several hundred holes in his body. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of Yang Jizong's people were all dead. Not a single one survived. Dark red blood dyed the ground red. The smell of blood permeated the air, making the originally pure air turbid. "Sanzi, my Sanzi, wake up. Don't scare me. Nothing can happen to you. If anything happens to you, I don't want to live anymore." The owner of the inn cried sadly in front of Sanzi, completely unaware of the changes in her surroundings. The killing intent in Jianqin's eyes slowly dissipated. He arrived in front of the owner of the inn and said, "Auntie, don't worry. Sanzi is still alive. He's just heavily injured and unconscious." Jianqin's voice was rather gloomy. His heart was heavy. He had just discovered that although Sanzi's life was not in danger, his saint weapon had been destroyed by Yang Jizong's people. According to the customs of the Tianyuan continent, Sanzi would never be able to cultivate. He would forever be a powerless commoner. Hearing Jianqin's words, the owner of the inn's eyes immediately lit up. She stared at Jianqin with hope and said, "Really? Young master, is my Sanzi really still alive?" Jianqin nodded firmly and said, "Auntie, let's send Sanzi back first. Don't worry, since Sanzi is Uncle Kendall's son, this grudge will not end here. I will get justice for you and make Yang Jizong pay the price." The owner of the inn was filled with gratitude as she constantly thanked him. "Thank you, young master. I will never be able to repay your kindness in my entire life, even if I do anything for you in the future." Jianqin hurriedly stopped her from continuing and said, "Auntie, please don't say that. I owe Uncle Kendall a favor, so it's only right that I help you. Let's send Sanzi back first." Afterwards, Jianqin carried the unconscious Sanzi, who was covered in blood, out of the inn. Only when they left did the innkeeper discover that the several dozen people from the Yangji sect were all lying in a pool of blood. She was so frightened that her face turned pale. Although it wasn't that she had never seen such a bloody scene before, the people who died here were all people with great backgrounds. The Yangji sect was one of the top powers in the Qiangan kingdom. For a moment, she was deeply worried. When Jianqin carried the bloodied Sanzi through the main hall of the inn, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. After Jianqin left, the inn's waiter immediately ran to the courtyard where Yang Jizong's people were resting. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, he saw the blood all over the ground and several dozen corpses lying around. His face immediately turned pale, and then he quickly reported this matter to the inn's manager. Not long after, a young man wearing a luxurious white robe and holding an expensive folding fan in his hand returned to the inn with a few guards. This person was the young master of Yang Jizong, the second son of the current sect leader. His status was noble enough to be on equal footing with the kingdom's princes. Previously, because he was shopping outside with a few guards, he was able to avoid this disaster. When the second young master of Yangjizong saw the bloody scene in the courtyard, his expression changed greatly. After asking the waiter about the situation, he hurriedly left and rushed to Yangjizong. He didn't stop for a moment along the way, not even caring about the corpses of his third martial uncle. Several dozen people from Yangjizong had been killed. This was a huge matter that could not be hidden at all. Very soon, the news spread like wildfire through the entire city, and with the help of the mercenaries, it quickly spread in all directions. Very soon, everyone knew about it. Jianqin had no idea what was happening in the outside world. Right now, he was carrying the bloodied three and the owner of the inn back to the somewhat old inn. Jianqin placed three on the bed, then immediately took out a radiant spirit pill from his space ring and fed it to three. After consuming the light divine pellet, the injuries on Third Son's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although his injuries seemed to be very serious because his physical fitness was not very strong, his injuries healed very quickly. Not long after, the unconscious three slowly woke up. However, he was currently extremely weak. Although his injuries had been completely healed by the radiant spirit pill, there were still many hidden dangers left in his body due to the destruction of his saint weapon. It would be very difficult for him to fully recover in a short amount of time. He would need some time to recuperate. However, in order for three to completely recover, Jianqin generously took out 2 more radiant spirit pills and fed them to him. After consuming 3 radiant spirit pills, the miraculous healing ability of Radiant Saint Force finally allowed 3 to completely recover. The period of weakness from the destruction of a saint weapon was completely removed as well. However, 3 was not happy at all after recovering. He knew the situation in his body extremely well. With his saint weapon destroyed, he would be reduced to a cripple who could not cultivate in the future. He would forever live at the bottom of the Tianyuan continent. Jianqin also understood 3's current feelings. He comforted him. 3, don't be too sad. Although you've lost your saint weapon, your future days will be even better than before. I will also avenge you. I will make Yangjizong pay a heavy price for you. Benefactor, I'm already extremely grateful that you've saved me. Yangjizong is just too powerful. It's not worth it to incur their enmity for me. 3 said with a gloomy expression. He was very depressed. Benefactor, thank you for saving our family's 3rd son. He's right. Yangjizong is very powerful. It's best if you don't offend them, or you'll get into trouble. The owner of the inn also sobbed. The 2 of them were ordinary people who lived at the bottom of society. Yangjizong's strength had already left a deep impression in their minds. The 2 of them did not want Jianqin to take such a risk. After that, the innkeeper said to Sanzi, let's leave this place in the future. We'll go to a remote mountain village and live a peaceful life. We don't have to live in fear all the time. Hearing this, without waiting for 3 to reply, Jianqin spoke first. How can that be? Auntie, 3, come with us to the kingdom of Jessen in the future. I'll let you live a good life. As for Yangjizong, I'll definitely not let them off. If I don't avenge 3, how can I, Jianqin, face Uncle Kendall? Hearing Jianqin's last sentence, 3 immediately became spirited. The sorrow on his face disappeared completely. He looked at Jianqin in surprise and asked, Benefactor, you know my father? Jianqin nodded slightly and said, 3, I'll tell you about your father when there's time. How are you feeling now? I'm fine now. I just feel weak all over. 3's voice was weak. He looked like he had no strength. 3, you should rest for today. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to Yangjizong for revenge. On this day, the inn was closed for business. Jianqin stayed in the inn and didn't go anywhere. He wanted to protect the safety of the mother and son. However, in order to prevent the mother and son from asking about Uncle Kendall, He found a random reason to shut himself in the room and told them not to disturb him. Now, Jianqin really didn't know how to explain to the mother and son. Could he just tell them that Uncle Kendall was dead and no longer in this world? Now that 3 had encountered such a situation, Jianqin didn't want to make them sad. Jianqin sighed and muttered, "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have told them that I knew Uncle Kendall." At this moment, in the city lord's estate, all the officials of the city had gathered together to discuss the matter of Yang Jizong's group being killed. Several dozen Yang Jizong's people were killed in the city, and one of them had a very high status in Yang Jizong. This matter was no small matter. If it wasn't handled properly, all of them would be implicated. City Lord, the person who dares to go against Yang Jizong, is definitely not a small figure. We can't afford to offend such a person. Moreover, the other party can easily kill an Earth Saint Master. This kind of strength is unmatched in our city. City Lord, I received news not long ago that a Heaven Saint Master has arrived in our city. I'm guessing that the destruction of the Yangji sect is most likely due to this mysterious expert, Jianqin said with a frown. What, a Heaven Saint Master? Heavens! This is not someone we can afford to offend. City Lord, it's best if we don't get involved in this matter. We can't afford to offend this expert. Let's leave it to Yang Jizong to handle. The officials of the city gathered together to discuss for a long time. In the end, they decided not to get involved in this matter. This matter was just too big. It wasn't something they could handle. The next morning, 3 and the owner of the inn changed into a new set of clothes and left the inn with Jianqin. On the street, Jianqin didn't try to hide anything. He directly controlled the wind and the surroundings to envelop the mother and son before taking them into the air. He flew in the direction of Yang Jizong, causing everyone on the street to be dumbfounded. Chapter 429. The Yang Jizong was very powerful in the Qiangan Kingdom. It was only second to the imperial family, but its reputation had almost surpassed the imperial family. This was because the Yang Jizong had 2 Heaven Saint Masters, which was the same number as the imperial family. Aside from the Heaven Saint Masters, the number of Earth Saint Masters was no less than the imperial families. There were over 20 of them, and several thousand disciples. It was truly a vast organization. The Yang Jizong was not a native organization of the Qiangan Kingdom. Instead, it had been stationed there when the Qiangan Kingdom had lost its former glory and declined. It had already been over 600 years since then. It had developed from an unknown sect to its current scale, and it even maintained a friendly relationship with the imperial family of the Qiangan Kingdom. Almost every generation of the Yang Jizong was connected by marriage in order to improve their relationship. At this moment, in a majestic hall within the Yang Jizong, over a dozen people of various ages sat with stern faces. They were all the upper echelons of the Yang Jizong, so they could make decisions about everything within the Yang Jizong. In the center of the hall, a young man in luxurious white robes stood with a rather ugly expression. There were a few guards behind him, all of whom had respectful expressions. "Fei, is what you said true? Has your 3rd martial uncle really been killed?" A middle-aged man sitting at the front asked with a stern face. "Father, this matter is absolutely true. 3rd martial uncle and several dozen of our Yangji sect's disciples were all killed in the inn. The guards behind me saw it with their own eyes. I believe that the news will soon spread throughout the Qiangan Kingdom." The young man in luxurious robes solemnly said. His face was also very solemn. "Then do you know who killed your 3rd martial uncle?" The middle-aged man followed up with another question. "I've heard some information from the inn's waiter. The initial conclusion is that the person who killed my Yang Jizong is a young man around 20 years old. As for his identity, I don't know," the young man said. Hearing this, the middle-aged man sitting at the front seemed to think of something. His expression suddenly changed, and his gaze immediately became sharp. He stared at the young man and asked in a deep voice, a young man around 20 years old, "Fei, do you know what he looks like?" The middle-aged man's change in expression stunned everyone present. Soon after, they seemed to have thought of something, and their expressions changed drastically. The young man was not stupid. He immediately noticed the change in the expressions of the upper echelons present. His heart immediately sank. He knew that the matter was probably more complicated than he had imagined. After a moment of silence, he said, "Father, I've never seen that person before, but from the waiter's description, I only know that he was extremely handsome. He had short hair that's an inch long." The middle-aged man muttered in a low voice. His expression also became extremely grave. He muttered in a low voice, "It really is him. It's exactly the same as the Grand Elder's description. I didn't expect that he would come to our Huayan sect today after causing such a ruckus in the imperial palace. It seems that he has come for the kingdom of Jessen." The middle-aged man suddenly stood up and said, "You can leave now. I already know that person's identity. Perhaps our Yongjizong will face a calamity. For the next 2 days, go hide outside for a period of time. Once everything has calmed down, come back. I'll immediately go and ask the old sect master." Hearing this, the young man's expression suddenly changed. He did not think that the matter would be so serious. He cupped his hands and said, "Yes, father, I'll take my leave now." After the young man left, the middle-aged man looked around and said with a grave expression, "Everyone, I'm sure you all know that person's identity. Go and arrange your people. Regardless of whether or not he has come for our Yongjizong, we must make preparations." Although the news of Jianqin causing a ruckus in the imperial palace had been suppressed by the imperial family, Yongjizong, a sect that had countless connections with the imperial family, had received the news immediately. Thus, although the upper echelons of the sect had never seen Jianqin before, they were not unfamiliar with him. His appearance and features were all memorized by them. "Yes, sect master." The people sitting below all replied in unison before leaving with heavy expressions. After that, the sect master of Yongjizong personally went to the back of the mountain to report this matter to the old sect master. When the old sect master of Yongjizong heard about this matter, he immediately came out of the mountain with a slightly pale old man. He was a supreme elder of Yongjizong and had a noble status. From your description, I already know who this mysterious young expert is. Even if he is not from the kingdom of Jessen, he must be related to the kingdom of Jessen. We joined forces with the Blue Wind Kingdom to kill the experts of the kingdom of Jessen. In the end, because of this mysterious expert's appearance, we were defeated. 7 of us were killed by him with a sneak attack. His strength is not to be underestimated. The Supreme Elder, with a slightly pale face, said in a deep voice, "He was one of the 2 people who survived the sneak attack of Jianqin. Old Gao, your injuries have more or less healed, right? How confident do you think our Yangji sect is in stopping that expert?" The Yangji sect's old sect master's expression was very calm, as if he didn't take this matter seriously at all. That mysterious expert caused a ruckus in the palace yesterday. Even Qianyin, who has reached the 5th rank, was not his opponent. With just the 2 of us, we have no chance of winning. The Supreme Elder, who was called Old Gao, said in a deep voice. Hearing this, the old sect master sneered with disdain and said, "If he is just making a ruckus, then I can let bygones be bygones. But if he dares to go too far, then he will regret it. Humph, a frog at the bottom of a well. Does he really think that I, Yongjizong, am a pushover? Old Yang, why do you say that? Do you have the confidence to deal with that mysterious expert?" The Supreme Elder looked at the old sect master with suspicion. The old sect master smiled and said, "Let's go to the front mountain first." Yongjizong Holy Mountain was the base of Yongjizong sect. A few hundred years ago, this mountain range was just a mountain with good scenery. In the Qiangan Kingdom, it was unknown, but ever since Yongjizong set up camp here, this mountain range was named Yangji Holy Mountain. As Yongjizong gradually grew stronger, the Yangji Holy Mountain's reputation also gradually spread. Today, the Yangji Holy Mountain had practically become the holy mountain of Qiangan Kingdom. Every day, there would be people coming to the foot of the mountain to ask for a master or join the Yangji Holy Mountain. Jianchen used the power of the wind element to bring the mother and son several thousand meters into the air. They flew directly into the Yangji Holy Mountain and finally landed in front of the mountain. When Jianchen arrived, the entire Yangji zone was already on high alert. Over 100 disciples were gathered at the entrance, guarding there with serious expressions. They were ready to fight. Jianchen's arrival was immediately discovered by the disciples guarding the entrance. Immediately, a middle-aged man shouted, "A heaven saint master has come. Quickly inform the sect master." Hearing this, all the disciples took out a whistle from their arms and blew into it. An ear-piercing sound was transmitted, carrying a strong penetrating force that resounded throughout the entire mountain range. The entire Yangji zone began to stir. A large number of disciples put down the things in their hands and rushed in the direction of the whistle. A cold smile appeared on Jianchen's face. Yangji zone's appearance clearly showed that they were prepared. They knew that he would come. The innkeeper and her son stood behind Jianchen in fear. Although they already knew that Jianchen was very strong and was a heaven saint master, the Yangji zone's reputation in the Qiangan Kingdom was just too great. It had already left a shadow in their hearts. Therefore, the mother and son were now filled with worry. They did not know if Jianchen could stop the thousands of people and countless experts of the Yangji zone by himself. The white tiger obediently crouched on Jianchen's shoulder. It blinked its bright eyes and nimbly jumped from Jianchen's right shoulder to his left. It then tightly grabbed onto Jianchen's collar with its front paws, stabilizing its body. Jianchen turned back to the innkeeper and said, "Auntie, Sanzi, you too stay here. Don't worry, with me here no one can hurt you. Benefactor, you must be careful." Sanzi looked at Jianchen with a complicated expression and said in a low voice. Jianchen smiled indifferently. He then strode forward and grabbed at the air with both hands. The fire element in the surroundings immediately gathered, condensing into 2 fire elemental swords in the blink of an eye. They shot towards the tall entrance of the Yangji zone with a wave of heat. "Run!" The expressions of the hundreds of Yangji zone disciples guarding the entrance changed greatly. None of them dared to hesitate and immediately fled for their lives. Boom! With a loud boom, the tall entrance of the Yangji zone was directly submerged in a wave of fire. Rocks flew in all directions in the wave of fire. The dozens of disciples guarding the entrance had no time to escape. They were all swallowed up by the wave of fire and let out miserable screams. Suddenly, a fierce wind raged between heaven and earth. The fierce wind raged between heaven and earth, blowing the fire towards the interior of the Yangji zone. Some of the surrounding weeds and trees were set ablaze in the blink of an eye. The raging flames continued to spread into the distance. Soon, some of the wooden houses closer to the entrance were set ablaze. A fiery red flame rose and burned fiercely, emitting thick smoke like a black dragon circling between heaven and earth. Jianchen grabbed at the air with both hands, and 2 fire elemental swords condensed in the blink of an eye. They then turned into a fiery red light and shot towards the Yangji zone. The sky was covered in flames, and the flickering flames could be seen clearly even by the people at the foot of the sacred Yangji mountain. Chapter 430. Jianchen made a grabbing motion in the air, once again condensing 2 fire elemental swords and shooting them towards the sword qi. When the 2 collided, an intense energy fluctuation erupted in the air. The fire elemental swords and the sword qi dissipated at the same time. The sky was filled with flames like a cloud of fire sprinkling down from the sky, submerging the buildings below and setting a large number of houses ablaze. The buildings in Yangji zone were all made of wood, which had very weak fire resistance. Furthermore, the fire elemental swords, condensed by Jianchen's world energy, were not something that ordinary flames could compare to. Therefore, these wooden buildings were easily set ablaze. In the blink of an eye, the Yangjizong was burning with raging flames everywhere. Many disciples were shuttling back and forth between the burning wooden houses, moving some valuable items. Many people picked up wooden buckets filled with water and began to extinguish the fire, preventing it from spreading further. In just a few breaths of time, Jianqin had caused a huge commotion in Yangjizong. The lady boss of the inn, Sanzi, and the two mother and son stayed in their original positions, trembling with fear. They were all dumbfounded as they watched the scene unfold in Yangjizong. Their expressions constantly changed. Sometimes they would be happy, excited that Yangjizong had fallen into such a state. Sometimes they would be alarmed. Yangjizong had long left a strong and invincible shadow in their hearts. Jianqin's actions had thoroughly offended Yangjizong. The mother and son, who had always lived at the bottom of society, were worried that they and Jianqin would bring great trouble to themselves. "Mother, this young master is so powerful. Who is he?" Sanzi stood there, cowering, and asked in a trembling voice. The lady boss of the inn shook her head blankly and said, "I don't know who this young master is. However, this young master seems to know your father. Since he is willing to help us, it seems that he has a good relationship with your father." Jianqin's eyes flashed as he looked ahead. Soon after, his body slowly rose from the ground, rising dozens of meters into the air. Opposite him, two old men in white robes quickly flew over from afar, facing Jianqin with a distance of 50 meters. The old lord of Yangjizong looked down at the buildings that were filled with flames. His old face had long become very unsightly. He stared sharply at Jianqin and said in a deep voice, "Sir, who are you? Tell me your name." Jianqin's gaze casually swept past the two old men before landing on the great elder. Killing intent flashed through his eyes as he said, "I never thought that I would meet you here. Humph, you can escape today, but you can't escape forever. I failed to take your life 2 days ago, so you won't be able to escape today." Seeing Jianqin ignore him like this, a cold light flashed through the eyes of the old lord of Yangjizong. Hearing Jianqin's words, the expression of the great elder of Yangjizong changed slightly. He said in a deep voice, "Sir, even if I haven't seen the Heaven Saint Masters of the various kingdoms in this region, I've heard of them. There doesn't seem to be someone like you among them. Just who are you? Why have you interfered with the grievances between us and the kingdom of Jessin?" Jianqin sneered. "I've always been a member of the kingdom of Jessin. My visit here has nothing to do with the kingdom of Jessin. Your people from Yangjizong destroyed the saint weapon of my old friend's son yesterday, reducing him to a cripple who can't cultivate. I can't rest easy if I don't take revenge for this. Today, I'll use your Yangjizong's blood to atone for the sins of my old friend's son." Jianqin didn't waste any more words. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 fire elemental swords quickly condensed in front of him. With a flick of his hand, he shot them at the 2 people in front of him. The old lord of Yangjizong and the great elder of Yangjizong each sent out a sword chi to disperse the fire elemental swords that Jianqin had shot at them. The swords exploded into flames that filled the sky. They then pressed down on the buildings in Yangjizong below. The great elder of Yangjizong angrily roared. The water elemental energy in the surroundings surged wildly, gathering into a large ball of water above him very quickly. He then pointed a finger at the ball of water above his head, causing it to explode loudly. It turned into a torrential downpour in an attempt to extinguish the flames. The combination of water and fire immediately produced a sizzling sound. The rainwater was evaporated by the high temperature of the flames, turning into thick water vapor that rose from below. It covered the sky and the sun, filling up the entire sky. The world was shrouded in a thick layer of mist, making it impossible to see one's own fingers. Jianqin sneered and said in a cold voice, "Let's see if your water will extinguish my fire, or if my fire will evaporate your water." The fire elemental energy between heaven and earth surged wildly. Under Jianshin's will, the fire elemental energy within a radius of 15 miles gathered in his direction. A pink circle of light with a diameter of 10 meters quickly condensed above Jianshin's head. In the blink of an eye, it evolved from a faint pink circle of light into a fireball that burned with raging flames. The temperature between heaven and earth rose rapidly with the appearance of the fireball. Seeing Jianshin's actions, the two experts of Yangjizong obviously knew what Jianshin was trying to do. Their expressions immediately changed. The old sect master of Yangjizong did not dare to hesitate. Wielding a sword that was covered in a layer of dense, earth-yellow saint force, he quickly charged toward Jianshin in an attempt to stop him. Jianshin sneered. With a thought, the fireball immediately exploded with a boom, turning into a wave of fire that shot toward the Yangjizong sect's base. Shortly after, the origin energy of the sword's spirits shot out from their right hands, stabbing out with lightning speed and colliding with the old sect master's sword. As soon as the two collided, the old sect master of Yangjizong's expression abruptly changed. He spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot and rapidly retreated in shock. A two-finger-sized hole had appeared in the saint weapon in his hand. Seeing the hole in the saint weapon, the old sect master of Yangjizong's face was filled with shock. He stared at Jianshin in disbelief and said with a trembling voice, Why? How is this possible?" The old sect master of Yangjizong was greatly shocked by the scene before him. This was because in a battle between experts of the same level, even if the difference in strength was great, it was still impossible to destroy a saint weapon so easily. At this moment, the fire had already engulfed the Yangjizong sect's base. Countless buildings were set ablaze, and the entire base of Yangjizong had been turned into a sea of fire. A large number of burning disciples were tossing and turning in the sea of fire as they cried out miserably. Countless people had been burned to death by the flames. These flames were no ordinary flames. They were condensed from the elemental energy of the world and were extremely violent. Those who were not strong enough were unable to withstand it for too long. The disciples who were fortunate enough not to be caught in the flames all panicked and began to flee in panic. In this life-threatening situation, even the upper echelons of the Yangji sect lost their usual calmness and began to flee, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire and be buried in the sea of fire. A battle between Heaven Saint Masters could be said to be an earth-shattering force. Just the shock waves from the battle were not something that ordinary people could withstand. Even Earth Saint Masters would find it difficult to protect themselves. Whoosh! When the fire spread to the Yangji sect's encampment, heavy rain began to fall from the sky and began a battle with the raging flames below. Sizzling sounds rang out incessantly, and the high temperature of the water vapor shrouded the heavens and earth, blocking out the sun. The great elder of the extreme Zongzong sect hovered in the air as he constantly gathered the elemental energy of the world to resist the flames. The mother and son of the inn had already retreated far away. The flames in front of them were extremely hot, so the two of them did not dare to get too close. Right now, the mother and son were dumbfounded as they stared at the scene in front of them. Was the scene in front of them really the high and mighty Yangjizong that was as inviolable as an emperor? Looking at the pouring rain, a cold light flashed through Jianshin's eyes. He immediately abandoned the old sect master of Yangjizong and charged toward the great elder with the origin energy of the Azulit sword spirits. Seeing Jianshin actually charge toward the great elder, the old sect master's expression could not help but change. He hurriedly warned, "Old Gao, be careful. The energy in his hand is very powerful. Do not take it head-on." Hearing the old sect master's warning, the great elder of Yangjizong's expression slightly changed. He immediately stopped gathering the elemental energy of the water, and a palm-sized, light blue sword quickly condensed in his hand. Using the advantage of its length, he avoided Jianshin's origin energy and stabbed toward the great elder's chest. Jianqin used the origin energy of the Azulite sword spirits to engage in an intense battle with the Great Elder of Yongjizong. In just 3 exchanges, the Great Elder Saint weapon was struck by the origin energy of the Azulite sword spirits, immediately creating a 2-finger-sized hole in the Saint weapon. He was heavily injured and spat out a mouthful of blood, just as Jianqin was about to give chase and end the Great Elder's life. A powerful pressure suddenly descended from the sky and locked onto Jianqin's body. At that moment, Jianqin felt as if the space around him had solidified, firmly locking his body in place. Moving was difficult, as if his entire body had sunk into a quagmire. A powerful aura radiated from the old sect master's body, soaring into the clouds. At that moment, the old sect master seemed to have transformed into a god of war, standing between the heavens and the earth. His white hair and robes fluttered in the wind. The long sword held high above his head emitted a dazzling light. Powerful energy constantly gathered, causing the space around it to distort, as if it could not withstand the pressure and would shatter. The winds and clouds in the sky changed. Fierce gales wreaked havoc in the world, blowing the sand and rocks from the ground into the air. Large amounts of burning buildings and wood flew in all directions. Even the lingering clouds that shrouded the mountain peak had completely disappeared in an instant. This is a heaven-tier battle skill. Jianqin stared at Yongjizong in astonishment. He had never thought that the old sect master would actually possess a heaven-tier battle skill. This had indeed exceeded Jianqin's expectations. After returning to the kingdom of Jessen, he had seen many heaven saint masters, but there was no one else who possessed a heaven-tier battle skill other than Changbo and Changwuji. The imperial advisor of the Qin Empire, He Mingdong, naturally did not count as one of them. Jianqin's face became rather stern. The heaven-tier battle skill used by a heaven saint master was so powerful that even he had to be careful. He did not dare to be careless. Although he could easily kill heaven saint masters, this was all because of the strength of the sword spirits. If he did not use this strength, Jianqin would have to expend quite a bit of effort to kill any heaven saint master. Chapter 431. Down below, all the disciples of the Yongjizong were dumbfounded. They all fled far away to look at the sky. They stared at the old sect master in shock and excitement. The fact that the old sect master had grasped a heaven-tier battle skill made them feel proud as his disciples. They all had the same thought in their minds, that the old sect master would definitely be able to kill the invading enemies with his heaven-tier battle skill. The revelation of the old sect master's heaven-tier battle skill shocked the upper echelons of the Yongjizong. Even the current sect master was no exception. The Yongjizong was founded by the old sect master and had existed for several hundred years. During that time, no one knew that the old sect master had actually grasped a heaven-tier battle skill. If it weren't for the fact that the invaders today were just too powerful, the fact that the old sect master possessed a heaven-tier battle skill would probably not have been known to the outside world. Heaven Saint Masters did not need much time to prepare their heaven-tier battle skills, so the old sect master finished charging up very quickly. He suddenly let out a roar that reverberated through the mountains. 100-meter-long streak of light shot out from the saint weapon in the old sect master's hand. It pierced the sky like a sword that held up the heavens. It was grand and majestic. Afterwards, the old sect master suddenly swung his saint weapon down toward Jianqin with lightning speed. The powerful aura shook the world as a dazzling light illuminated the surroundings. The energy that had been compressed to the limit was like a miniature sun, emitting a blinding light. Wherever the sword passed, the space there would violently distort. There were even extremely small cracks that were black in color. They were extremely eye-catching within the white light. Jianqin was firmly locked onto by the powerful aura of the heaven-tier battle skill. There was no way for him to dodge or escape. The only thing he could do was take it head-on. Jianqin's face was solemn as he used the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits to the limit. At the same time, his eyes became a strange violet color. His left eye flickered with a violet light, while his right eye flickered with an azure light. It was like a pair of ghostly eyes that emitted a will-o'-the-wisp. On the ground, several dozen trees suddenly rose from the ground. They floated into the air with faint azulate sword chi, flying toward the huge streak of light like moths to a flame. Jianchen followed behind, raising the origin energy of the azulate sword spirits to receive the attack. The ground around the mother and son in the inn suddenly rose up, forming a completely sealed fortress that protected the mother and son. The soil rapidly solidified and constantly thickened. Very soon it became a rock that was as hard as steel. From a distance, boom! A huge explosion rang out as Jianchen and the old sect master's heaven-tier battle skills collided. The violent shockwaves of energy were like a flood, rushing out in all directions. The buildings in Yangji Zone that hadn't been engulfed by the sea of flames were as fragile as tofu in front of the powerful shockwaves. They were sent flying without any resistance. Wherever the shockwaves passed, everything in their path was mercilessly sent flying. Trees were uprooted, weeds were torn apart, and even a layer of soil was scraped off the ground. Only the rocks that protected the mother and son in the inn were able to withstand the shockwaves, but they were also covered in cracks. A moment later, when the energy shockwaves finally calmed down, the entire Yangji sect's encampment had long been destroyed beyond recognition. Everywhere was a mess. Even the wooden houses and pavilions had been blown away by the energy shockwaves, creating an empty space. The Yangji sect's disciples had all been hit by the powerful shockwaves, and painful howls could be heard everywhere. Some of the weaker disciples had even fallen off a cliff not far away, dying for their lives. The old sect master of Yangji Zone, sect hovered in the air with a pale face. A trace of exhaustion could be seen on his face. He didn't seem to care about the sect's situation at all. At this moment, he was staring ahead with a solemn expression, and a trace of disbelief could be seen in his eyes. Jianchen was still hovering in the air. The origin energy of the sword spirits in his right hand was still exuding pure sword chi, but compared to before, his face was slightly paler. His clothes had become tattered, making him look like a beggar. A faint trace of blood had appeared on his forehead, passing through his nose, lips, throat, and other parts of his body, all the way to his abdomen. His clothes had also been torn in half, and one could clearly see his white skin underneath. The power of a heaven-tier battle skill was just too great. With Jianchen's ability, even if he used his full strength, he still wouldn't be able to block it without suffering any damage. After all, a heaven-tier battle skill was not an earth-tier battle skill. If it were an earth-tier battle skill, even if it was a high-level one, it wouldn't be much of a threat to Jianchen. He could block it with just the elemental sword. However, Jianchen couldn't block a heaven-tier battle skill so easily. Even if he used the origin energy of the sword spirits, Jianchen still suffered some injuries. You actually managed to block my heaven-tier battle skill. Yang Jizong cried out in disbelief. His heart was in turmoil. Although the heaven-tier battle skill he used was only a primary heaven-tier battle skill, he had studied it for several hundred years. He had already mastered it to the point of perfection. He deeply understood the power of that attack. Even if his opponent was a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, he definitely wouldn't be able to block it as easily as Jianchen. At the very least, he would be heavily injured. Jianchen's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, "I never thought that you would actually know a heaven-tier battle skill. However, even if you use it, it won't change anything." With that, killing intent surged in Jianchen's eyes as he charged toward the old sect master with the origin energy of the sword spirits in his hand. The old sect master's greatest trump card was the heaven-tier battle skill. Seeing that it was unable to heavily injure Jianchen, he had already lost the courage to fight. He immediately retreated in an attempt to increase the distance between him and Jianchen. "Old Yang, I'll help you. Let's work together to deal with him." I refuse to believe that the Heaven-tier battle skill is only able to injure him on the surface. The great elder quickly flew over from afar as he swung his huge sword at Genshin with a surging blue light. A gleam of light flashed through the old sect master's eyes when he heard that. He immediately understood and said, "That's right. Even a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master wouldn't be able to block my Heaven-tier battle skill so easily. Your injuries definitely aren't as light as they seem on the surface. Humph. You're still trying to act like nothing's wrong." The old sect master suddenly understood and was no longer afraid. His battle intent immediately surged as he advanced instead of retreating. His sword stabbed toward Genshin with powerful ripples of energy. Genshin looked at the two of them with a sneer. At this moment, the great elder had already approached Genshin. His sword stabbed toward Genshin's forehead with surging water attributed Saint Force. Genshin's right arm suddenly shook as the origin energy of the sword spirits left behind a dazzling streak of light in the air. It collided with the great elder's sword at an extremely fast speed. The great elder knew how powerful the origin energy of the sword spirits was, so he did not dare to take it head-on. He suddenly pressed his sword downward, stabbing toward Genshin's heart. Although Genshin had lost to Saint Force and did not possess the same speed as before, his body was much stronger than before. He could use 80% of his speed with just his physical strength. His wrist nimbly rotated as the origin energy of the sword spirits chased after the great elder's sword. With a flash of light, the origin energy collided with the great elder's sword. A 2-finger-sized gap immediately appeared in the great elder's saint weapon. The great elder's face suddenly changed as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even though he had tried his best to avoid clashing with the origin energy of the sword spirits, he was unable to completely avoid Genshin's attack under Genshin's purposeful attack. Myriad illusory swords. The old sect master Yangjizong also approached Genshin and used a high-level Earth-tier battle skill without any hesitation. The sword in his hand turned into a sky full of illusory swords that enveloped Genshin. The illusory swords overlapped and blotted out the sun. Every single illusory sword was completely condensed from energy and possessed great destructive power. Genshin's eyes flickered with an azure and violet light. Countless pieces of rock rose into the air and shot toward the old sect master's Earth-tier battle skill with faint azure and violet sword chi. Each piece of rock was able to disperse a strand of sword chi. The dense amount of rock completely dissolved the old sect master's Earth-tier battle skill. At the same time, the origin energy of the sword spirits in Genshin's hand turned into a streak of rainbow light, stabbing toward the great elder with lightning speed. Spurt! The origin energy of the sword spirits stabbed out from between the great elder's eyebrows and exited from the back of his head. It pierced through his head and obliterated his soul on the spot. His soul was obliterated as a result. "Old Gao!" The old sect master cried out in grief. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Genshin's left hand reached out with lightning speed and took the great elder's space ring. He then raised the origin energy of the sword spirits and slashed at the old sect master. The old sect master's expression changed. He no longer had the courage from before and immediately retreated. At the same time, he yelled, "You will regret your actions today. No matter who you are, I, Yangjizong, will wipe out your entire family." Hearing this, Genshin's face was filled with disdain. He chased after the old sect master and yelled, "From today onwards, the Yangjizong will cease to exist. I'd like to see how Yangjizong will destroy me. A frog in a well. Do you really think my Yangjizong is just a small sect? The strength of my Yangjizong is far beyond your imagination." The old sect master yelled out with great confidence. Genshin's expression changed slightly when he heard this. He immediately stopped chasing after the old sect master and said, Does Yangji Zong have some sort of deep background? Humph. The strength of my Yangji Zong is far beyond your imagination. In front of me, Yangji Zong, you're just an ant. This is only one of the branches that I, Yangji Zong, have set up to observe the situation of the continent. Today, you've killed my Yangji Zong. In the future, I, Yangji Zong, will definitely send experts to wipe out your entire family. The old sect master yelled out. Jianqin sneered. I don't care who you are. You won't be able to escape today. Jianqin did not waste any more words. The origin energy of the sword spirits began to glow with an almost tangible violet light. He then charged at the old sect master with great speed. He did not hide the intense killing intent in his eyes. The old sect master's face was sunken. He yelled out, "You will regret offending my protector clan." As he said that, the old sect master took out a piece of jade from his space ring. He crushed it with his hand, and an inexplicable pulse of energy immediately surged out. The surrounding space began to violently distort before the old sect master's body vanished. Jianqin was shocked. He stared in the direction where the old sect master had disappeared in disbelief. He immediately closed his eyes and expanded his soul to cover a radius of 15 kilometers in an attempt to find the old sect master. However, to his disappointment, the old sect master seemed to have vanished into thin air. He was not within the range of Jianqin's soul. Chapter 432. What is this thing? It actually allowed someone to escape 15 kilometers away. Jianqin frowned slightly. His face was filled with doubt. He was very curious as to how the old sect master Yangji Zong had managed to escape. Also, what was that piece of jade he had crushed before he escaped? Jianqin carefully recalled the old sect master's words and murmured, "A protector clan? Looks like this Yangji Zong really is, as he said. He's not as simple as he seems on the surface. But who cares what kind of organization he is? It's not like there aren't any large organizations that have enmity with me. One more doesn't matter. In this era, saint rulers rarely come out. An existence like that shouldn't personally come out for a small territory like Yangji Zong. As for a heaven saint master, that kind of expert doesn't pose much of a threat to me." Thinking up to this point, Jianqin calmed down quite a bit. Soon after, he looked at the messy scene below and the disciples of Yangji Zong. He immediately thought of how Sanzi's saint weapon had been destroyed by the disciples of Yangji Zong. Killing intent immediately erupted from his eyes as he coldly said, "From today onwards, the Yangji Zong no longer exists. Everyone will pay 100-fold, 1,000-fold for what you've done." Jianqin slowly closed his eyes. With his mind, he controlled everything in the world. Dozens of trees in the distance suddenly exploded, filling the sky with wood shavings. Like moths to a flame, the wood shavings shot towards the scattered disciples like moths to a flame. They were so densely packed that they blotted out the sun. It was as if 10,000 arrows had been shot at the same time. It was a terrifying sight. Faced with such an attack, the ordinary disciples of the Yangji sect were unable to resist at all. In the blink of an eye, their bodies were pierced by dozens of bloody holes. Many of the disciples didn't even understand what was going on before they were shot to death by dozens of wooden shards and rocks. Some of the people who had their throats pierced could not even hear the miserable cries of those who had their throats pierced. The scene was a complete massacre. Jianqin's mind covered a radius of 15 kilometers. Nothing in this area could escape his senses. Even an ant on the ground could be clearly sensed, so the disciples of Yangji Zong had no chance of escaping. The dense wood shavings directly locked onto several thousand disciples and began a bloody massacre. The current sect master of Yangji Zong and a few Earth Saint masters only lasted for less than a breath's time under this storm-like attack. The protective saint force around their bodies was dispersed, and their bodies were pierced into a hornet's nest. Countless blood swords shot out of their bodies like fountains. It was a ghastly sight. In just a few breaths' time, all the thousands of disciples within 15 kilometers of Yangjizong died. Every one of them had dozens or even hundreds of bloody holes on their bodies. Bright red blood surged out and dyed the ground red. Not long after, it gathered into a river of blood that flowed up and down. The entire area was filled with a thick smell of blood. The purple light in Jianshen's eyes slowly dissipated. His eyes gradually returned to normal. He coldly looked down at the scene below. Soon after, the space rings on the hands of the upper echelons of Yangjizong left their fingers and quickly flew towards Jianshen in the air. In the end, they were caught by Jianshen. There were more than 10 of them in total. After that, Jianshen's mind covered the entire Yangjizong and took away all the cultivation manuals and monster cores in Yangjizong. Although these manuals did not interest Jianshen, they were still a fortune. In addition, the monster cores stored in Yangjizong were also very abundant. Although it was not as good as the treasury of the Pingyang Kingdom, it was not far off. There were more than 40,000 monster cores in total. Among them, there were 2 Class 6 monster cores, 300 Class 5 monster cores, and the rest were Class 4 monster cores and below. In such a short period of time, he had obtained tens of thousands of monster cores. This made Jianshen sigh in his heart. A few years ago, Jianshen was still desperately fighting against magical beasts for monster cores. Now he had casually wiped out a sect and obtained such a huge harvest. This made Jianshen deeply understand the benefits of great strength. Jianshen calmed himself down. He came to the huge rock that was full of cracks outside Yangjizong's mountain gate. When the old sect leader of Yangjizong used the heaven rank combat skill, Jianshen controlled the earth element in the surroundings to form this huge rock to protect the mother and son in the inn. This was to prevent them from being affected. This was because at such a close distance, the aftermath of the heaven rank combat skill was enough to cause devastating damage to ordinary people like them. It was far beyond what they could withstand. With a thought, Jianshen silently split the huge rock into 2 halves, revealing the mother and son who were hiding inside. At this moment, the mother and son were standing there with pale faces, not knowing what to do. "Auntie, Sanzi, I have avenged you." Jianshen came to the mother and son's side and said softly. He looked at Sanzi with a trace of guilt in his eyes, because he was the one who had caused Sanzi to end up like this. The innkeeper and Sanzi stared at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. What appeared in front of them was a large expanse of empty ground. There was a large patch of soil on the ground that had been scorched black by the flames. The originally densely packed buildings had completely disappeared, leaving behind a mess. Even further away, large patches of corpses were strewn all over the ground. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. Looking at the scene in front of them, the mother and son were so shocked that they were speechless. Their expressions were filled with shock. It was hard for them to imagine that Jianshen had actually reduced the incomparably powerful Yangjizong to such a state by himself. Was the scene of corpses strewn all over the ground really caused by the strength of a single person? The mother and son were stunned by Jianshen's unbelievably powerful strength. It was only at this moment that the 2 of them suddenly understood that Jianshen's strength was far beyond their imagination. "Auntie, Sanzi, come back with me to the kingdom of Jessen. I will let you live a good life. You will no longer have to live in fear all the time like before. I promise you that no one in the kingdom of Jessen will dare to bully you." Jianshen spoke with a gentle voice full of concern. The innkeeper was the first to react. When she heard Jianshen's words, she immediately shook her head and said gratefully, "Sir, thank you for your kindness. You have already helped us a great deal. We do not want to trouble you and cause you more trouble. I have already decided to leave with Sanzi and go to a small mountain village to live a peaceful life." "How can that be?" "Auntie, come with me. I, Jianshen, swear that I will let you live a good life in the future." Jianshen hurriedly tried to persuade her. He would not let Uncle Kendall's family live such a hard life. After that, Jianqin spent a lot of effort to convince the mother and son to move to the kingdom of Jessen. After convincing the mother and son, Jianqin let out a sigh of relief. He then took the mother and son into the air and left the holy mountain of Yangji. After Jianqin left on the holy mountain of Yangji, there were scattered disciples walking around the sect with dull expressions. Not all of Yangji Zong's disciples had died. Some disciples 15 kilometers away from Yangjizong had luckily escaped. Although there were still disciples left in Yangjizong, the upper echelons of Yangjizong had all been killed. Only the old sect master had escaped by some unknown means. Now, Yangjizong only existed in name. As the number one sect in the kingdom of Chang'an, Yangjizong had a lot of people gathering at the foot of the holy mountain of Yangji every day. So, everyone at the foot of the holy mountain of Yangji could hear the soaring flames and deafening explosions clearly. At this moment, many people had gathered at the foot of the holy mountain of Yangji, pointing their fingers at the towering mountain peak and discussing it. Did something good happen to Yangjizong today? They kept setting off firecrackers. That's not right. I clearly saw the soaring flames on the holy mountain of Yangji just now. Look, even some of the clouds in the sky are still black. Could it be that something big has happened in the Yangji sect? From the looks of it, it seems like some top experts are fighting. Are you stupid? Yangjizong is so powerful. In the kingdom of Chang'an, who dares to go against Yangjizong? Yangjizong is the number one sect in the kingdom of Chang'an. They also have quite a good relationship with the royal family. In the kingdom of Chang'an, there is no force that dares to offend Yangjizong. Many people who had come to join Yangjizong and wanted to become his disciple were discussing spiritedly. They all voiced their guesses. Look! Someone has flown away from the holy mountain of Yangji. It's a heaven Saint Master. Suddenly, a sharp-eyed person pointed at the sky and cried out, "A heaven Saint Master has flown away from the holy mountain of Yangji." Did something really happen to Yangjizong? A few quick-witted people immediately linked the holy mountain of Yangji to the strange phenomenon that had occurred earlier. Their expressions immediately changed. Since there are no Yangjizong disciples here to stop us, why don't we go up and take a look? Immediately after, the people who had gathered at the foot of the mountain started to climb up the holy Yangji mountain. Very quickly, they arrived at the Yangji sect's encampment. However, the scene in front of them made everyone's eyes widen. Yangjizong has been destroyed. After a long time, a cry of surprise came out of nowhere and woke everyone up. The news of Yangjizong's destruction could not be concealed at all. Afterwards, the news spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom of Chang'an, shaking the entire kingdom. However, none of this had anything to do with Jianqin. At this moment, he was bringing the innkeeper and her son back to the eastern fort of the kingdom of Jessen after a few hours of flight. Chapter 433. In the 2 days that Jianqin had been away, the kingdom of Jessen's eastern fort was very peaceful. The Blue Wind Kingdom's army did not attack again. As for the first-class city where the eastern fort's army was stationed, both sides of the collapsed walls were filled with craftsmen. Tens of thousands of craftsmen began to rebuild the tall walls, dividing up the work in an orderly manner. Jianqin flew directly into the city with the mother and son pair. In the end, he descended in front of the inn that had been converted into a temporary command post. When his feet touched the ground, the mother and son pair's legs went soft and they almost lost their balance and fell to the ground. The owner of the inn was a person who could not cultivate saint force in the first place. As for the 3 children who had condensed saint weapons, they had become ordinary people after their saint weapons were destroyed. Their bodies were very weak, and after flying for so long, the mother and son pair's legs had already become numb. Jianqin's descent from the sky immediately alarmed the soldiers guarding the inn. They all shouted and rushed over, surrounding Jianqin from afar. Their faces were very serious, and they did not know whether Jianqin was a friend or foe. Such a scene immediately made the mother and son pair nervous. They hid behind Jianqin while trembling with fear, wondering if the scene of Yang Jizong would repeat itself. A person who looked like a military officer walked out from inside. When he saw Jianqin, his face immediately changed, and he quickly shouted to the surrounding soldiers, "What are you doing?" "This is Lord Imperial Protector. Quickly greet Lord Imperial Protector." Jianqin's identity was known by many high-ranking military officers, but to the ordinary soldiers, there were not many people who could recognize Jianqin. Although Jianqin had displayed extraordinary strength in the battle outside the city, there were very few people who could see his face clearly. Hearing the military officer's words, the soldiers let out a sigh of relief and bowed to Jianqin. "Greetings, Lord Imperial Protector." However, all the soldiers were very curious. They did not know when the kingdom of Jessin had an imperial protector. Not only had they never heard of him before, but he was also ridiculously young. The military officer immediately arrived in front of Jianqin. He first bowed to Jianqin and said respectfully, "Lord Imperial Protector, this subordinate is Lin Yan. How may I be of service to Lord Imperial Protector?" "Is General Lu here?" Jianqin asked. As soon as Jianqin finished speaking, he looked into the inn and saw General Lu in armor quickly walking in from outside. He came in front of Jianqin and bowed respectfully to Jianqin. "Lord Imperial Protector, you are finally back. Did anything happen in the 2 days I was away?" Jianqin asked calmly. General Lu shook his head and said, "Nothing bad happened, but there was a lot of good news. Lord Imperial Protector, let's go in and talk." "All right." Jianqin nodded and agreed. He then turned to look at the mother and son in the inn and said softly, "Auntie Sanzi, you should rest here for 2 days. You haven't eaten all day, so you must be hungry." Jianqin treated the mother and son in the inn with concern from the bottom of his heart. Old General Lu's gaze also landed on the mother and son in the inn. With his sharp eyes, he could tell with a single glance that the mother and son were people who lived at the lowest level of society. Their expressions were filled with unconcealable fear, and even their gazes were evasive when they looked at him. General Lu was a little confused. He did not know what the relationship between the mother and son and the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was. The innkeeper did not have any objections and said, "I will do as benefactor says." Jianqin smiled bitterly and said, "What benefactor?" "Auntie, you can just call me Jianqin in the future." How can I do that?" The innkeeper suddenly became a little helpless. Although she lived at the lowest level of society, she still knew a little about etiquette. Even this seemingly high-ranking general had to bow to Jianqin and address him as the imperial protector. However, she directly called Jianqin by his name. This made her feel a little terrified. After hearing Jianqin's words, General Lu and the officer who had come out earlier both changed their expressions. The two of them looked at each other and saw a trace of surprise in each other's eyes. Immediately, the way they looked at the mother and son in the inn changed greatly. This was because neither of them knew the name of the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. However, at this moment, this imperial protector was treating the mother and son in such a friendly manner. Even with his noble status, he actually took the initiative to let the mother and son call him by his name. This was enough to show that the relationship between the two of them was not ordinary. This made General Lu and the officers' thoughts become active. Although it was very difficult to establish a relationship with the Qin Empire's imperial protector directly, they could do it from the side. The identity of the Qin Empire's imperial protector was too special. If any family in the kingdom of Jessin were to establish a relationship with the Qin Empire's imperial protector, it would be a great honor for the family. Even if they were from a small family, they would instantly become an existence that no one dared to provoke. After that, the old general called over an officer of high status. This officer was a member of the old General Lu's family and had the same bloodline as the old General Lu's. He asked him to personally entertain the mother and son duo at the inn and treat them as VIPs without the slightest neglect. He also whispered something in the officer's ear. Following this, the officer's expression changed. He immediately put on a smile and respectfully invited the mother and son in. His warm attitude made the mother and son feel very uncomfortable. Even their movements were restricted, and they did not know what to do. After all, they were facing a high-ranking officer. Afterwards, Jianqin and General Liu went to a room with good soundproofing. Xiao Tian, Kafir, and another expert from the Kingdom of Jessen who had received the news also hurried over. They gathered together and reported the situation of the past 2 days to Jianqin as subordinates. Lord Imperial Protector, as of this morning, we have received news from the northern and western fortresses. The armies of the Qiangan Kingdom and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom have retreated from our Kingdom of Jessen's territory. Furthermore, the 2 kingdoms have sent envoys in hopes of negotiating with our Kingdom of Jessen, General Liu said. Hearing this, Jianqin smiled. This news was indeed great news for the Kingdom of Jessen. With the 2 kingdoms retreating, the pressure on the Kingdom of Jessen would be reduced by a lot. What's the situation at the southern fortress? Jianqin immediately asked. Lord Imperial Protector, we received news from the southern fort yesterday. A few Imperial Protectors from Qin Huangju have already arrived at the southern fort. The experts from both sides had a huge battle in the wilderness. 2 experts from the Anles Kingdom fell, while the remaining experts from the Anles Kingdom fled without a fight. Currently, the Anles Kingdom's army has retreated to a location 100 miles away, biding their time. General Liu spoke with unconcealable excitement on his face. It could be said that the Kingdom of Jessen had completely survived the ordeal. Jianqin nodded slightly. This was within his expectations. Of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Qin Empire, only Xiao Tian remained in the eastern fortress. The other 4 had gathered in the southern fortress. Coupled with Chang Wuji and the 3 Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Jessen, the number of Heaven Saint Masters in the southern fortress had reached a terrifying 8. Unless something unexpected happened, the Anles Kingdom would not be able to breach the southern fortress, even if they sent all of their Heaven Saint Masters. This was because the imperial advisors of the Qin Empire were just too powerful. Each of them could easily fend off 2 opponents of the same level, and all of them possessed heaven-tier battle skills. General, there's important news. At this moment, a loud voice rang out from outside the room. General Liu's face immediately became stern. He yelled, "Come in." The door opened and an armored general walked in. He respectfully bowed to Jianqin and the 3 Heaven Saint Masters before taking out a letter. He said, "General, the army of the Blue Wind Kingdom has begun to retreat. At the same time, they have sent a letter of surrender." General Liu's face lit up. He quickly took out the letter of surrender and began to read it. A happy smile gradually appeared on his face. Fantastic, fantastic. This letter was personally written by the king of the Blue Wind Kingdom. Not only did they withdraw their army from the Kingdom of Jessen, they are also willing to compensate us for our losses. Currently, the ambassador from the Blue Wind Kingdom is also on their way. They hope to discuss further with the Kingdom of Jessen. Hearing this, the principal of the Kargath Academy and the other Heaven Saint Master of the Kingdom of Jessen revealed a smile. Their faces were filled with unconcealable excitement. Currently, the situation at the 3 forts in the east, west, and north of the Kingdom of Jessen had stabilized. Only the Anles Kingdom in the south had yet to withdraw their army. However, the people present were not worried at all. The southern fort of the Kingdom of Jessen had gathered 8 Heaven Saint Masters. It could be said that the Anles Kingdom did not have the ability to break through the blockade of 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Their withdrawal was only a matter of time. The people present calmed down very quickly. General Liu sat back down and said, "Imperial Protector, did your trip to the Qiangan Kingdom go smoothly?" "Yes." Jianqin nodded slightly and said, "You don't have to worry about the Qiangan Kingdom. It's already been resolved. Their king has also promised that he will not do anything harmful to the Kingdom of Jessen." That's good, that's good. It's been hard on you, Imperial Protector. The assistance you have provided to the Kingdom of Jessin will be deeply remembered by all the citizens of the Kingdom of Jessin. It will never be forgotten." General Lu's face was filled with gratitude. Afterward, the principal of the Kargath Academy, Kafir, and the other expert of the Kingdom of Jessin also expressed their gratitude before the crowd dispersed. Jian Qin carried the little white tiger to the room where the mother and son were resting in. He just happened to see the military officer that old General Lu had arranged for him to greet the mother and son warmly, as if he was very close to them. On the dining table, there was already a plate of hot delicacies, giving off an alluring aroma that whetted one's appetite. Chapter 434. As soon as he saw Jianqin enter, the officer immediately greeted Jianqin respectfully. Jianqin dismissed the officer before saying to the mother and son, "Auntie, Sanzi, are you used to living here?" "It's all right. It's just that the general is a little too passionate. It's a little unbearable," the owner of the inn replied. Afterward, Jianqin conversed with the mother and son and finally learned their names. The owner of the inn was called Xinfang. She was born in a small mountain village, and her parents had passed away early. She grew up in the same village as Uncle Kendall and had fallen in love with each other since they were young. After they grew up, they were arranged to get married by the villagers. Sanzi's name was Ken III. It sounded a little old-fashioned, but people who grew up in a small mountain village did not have good names. As a result, under Kendall's suggestion, Ken III became Sanzi's name. Kendall was the strongest person in the village in terms of cultivation. He had condensed a saint weapon at the age of 21 and would often hunt in the mountains. He would bring back some wild beasts to share with the villagers. He was deeply respected by everyone in the village. However, although life in the village was rather comfortable, Kendall had left the village soon after his third son was born due to the lack of resources. He wanted to increase his strength as quickly as possible and also for his son's future. He wandered the Tianyuan continent by himself. In the past 20 years, Kendall would return home every once in a while. He would bring back quite a lot of money each time, greatly improving the living conditions of the family. He even left behind 2 class, 1 monster cores for Sanzi's cultivation. As time went on, Kendall's family became wealthier and wealthier. In the end, they opened a small inn in a Grade 2 city in the Qiangan Kingdom and stayed there for 10 years. Benefactor, my Kendall used to come back at least 2 or 3 times a year. I don't know what happened to him in the past few years, but he hasn't come back even once. There's no news from him at all. Benefactor, tell me, where is my Kendall now?" Xinfang asked again, her face full of hope. Jianqin sighed inside when he heard that. However, he did not show it on the surface. He said, "Auntie, Uncle Kendall received a very lucrative mission a few years ago, so he went to a very distant kingdom with a group of people in a hurry. Just the journey would take a year or 2, but he's been gone for so long. I believe he'll be back very soon." Jianqin did not want to tell this sad matter to the mother and son. He could only make up a lie to fool them. Although he knew that this matter would be discovered sooner or later, he could delay it for as long as possible. He believed that the mother and son would realize that something had happened to Kendall. At that time, they would at least be mentally prepared. Then, it would not be too late to tell them the truth. At the very least, their tolerance would be stronger. Xinfang did not doubt Jianqin's words. Her face suddenly showed a trace of realization. She murmured, "No wonder our Kendall hasn't come back for so many years. It turns out that he went on a long journey." Jianqin stayed for a while before leaving. As for Xinfang and her son, Jianqin had already made arrangements for them. He planned to bring them to Lore City and settle them down in Changyang Prefecture. With his current status, he believed that no one in Changyang Prefecture would dare to oppose his decision. For the sake of the 2 of them, Jianqin purposefully stayed for an extra day so that the 2 of them could have a good rest. Otherwise, he would have left in a hurry to fly to the Changyang clan. Early the next morning, news came from the southern fortresses. The army of the Antilles kingdom had completely retreated from the kingdom of Jesson. At the same time, the king of the Antilles kingdom had also issued a letter of surrender and promised to compensate the kingdom of Jesson for the war. In addition, the Antilles kingdom had also temporarily formed a special group of ministers and princes to head to the kingdom of Jesson. They were very sincere. At the same time, General Liu also received an imperial edict from the king of the kingdom of Jesson, requesting the leaders of the various fortresses to closely monitor the situation of the enemy's retreat. At the same time, the army would advance and reoccupy the border fortresses. At this point, the war that had lasted for a few months finally came to an end. However, the final result made everyone's jaws drop. They felt that it was very unbelievable. Some of the surrounding kingdoms that did not participate in the war sent out a large number of spies to gather the latest information. Before long, a shocking piece of news rapidly spread. However, only the leaders of the various large organizations and important figures of the kingdoms knew about it. They were immediately speechless from shock. The kingdom of Jesson had actually allied with one of the 8 great empires of the continent, the Qin Empire. Although the Qin Empire was very far away, hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, the deterrence of one of the 8 great empires was still extremely great. No one dared to look down on it. Other than that, an extremely young and mysterious expert had mysteriously appeared in the kingdom of Jesson. First, he had wreaked havoc in the imperial palace of the Pingyang kingdom, capturing the Pingyang king in front of all the officials. Then he had wreaked havoc in the imperial palace of the Qiangan kingdom, killing 2 experts in the palace. In the end, he had annihilated the strongest organization in the Qiangan kingdom, Yangjizong. In total, he had killed over a dozen heaven saint masters from 3 kingdoms. Everyone who heard this news was shocked. Has the peerless ancestor Changyang returned? There doesn't seem to be anyone else with such battle prowess apart from him. Has the ancestor Changyang broken through? Many experts thought of the same person as soon as they heard this news. However, after this matter, the status of the kingdom of Jesson rapidly rose due to its relationship with the Qin Empire. Even a few powerful kingdoms that were tens of thousands of kilometers away received the news and sent their own envoys to the kingdom of Jesson with gifts. 40,000 kilometers away from the kingdom of Jesson, there was a kingdom called the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. The Heavenly Eagle Kingdom was one of the few powerful kingdoms within 100,000 kilometers. It was extremely powerful, 2 times the size of the kingdom of Jesson. There were 16 known Heaven Saint Masters in the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. In the imperial palace of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, the king sat in a majestic hall. An old man and a young man knelt before him with their heads lowered. The king gently sighed as he sat on the dragon throne. He murmured, "I never thought that the kingdom of Jesson would have connections with the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms. The Qin Empire has even sent a few imperial advisors to assist us. How unbelievable!" The king glanced at the 2 people below and said, "My son, Prime Minister Che, I have summoned you today because I have an important mission for you. The 2 of you will immediately set off tomorrow morning with gifts to the kingdom of Jesson. You will investigate the relationship between the kingdom of Jesson and the Qin Empire. Prime Minister Che, I trust you know what to do next." This old subject understands. The old man, kneeling below, bowed and said, "Yes." The king of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom pondered for a moment before speaking again. The land that the kingdom of Jesson occupies has many fertile lands. If they are given time, they will develop into a country that is no weaker than our Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. No matter what the relationship between them and the Qin Empire is, it is worth it for us to rope them in. This will be of great benefit to our Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. I have heard that the king of the kingdom of Jesson dotes on his daughter, Princess Glan. She is also known as the most beautiful woman in the kingdom of Jesson. She is naturally beautiful and has great talent in cultivation. My son, the main purpose of your trip is to propose marriage to the king of the kingdom of Jesson. I hope that our heavenly eagle kingdom and the kingdom of Jessen will be able to form a marriage alliance. I will obey father's orders. The battle in the kingdom of Jessen had come to a complete stop. The Heaven Saint Masters stationed in the surroundings had all returned. The next morning, Jianqin and Xiao Tian planned to leave as well. However, before they left, General Lu suddenly found them and said, "Imperial Protector, our king has already set up a banquet in the Imperial Palace. He sincerely welcomes the Imperial Protector's assistance. He hopes that you can come to the palace for a chat so that we can play host to you." Jianqin refused without any hesitation. "I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't be going." "Xiao Tian, you go in my place." "Yes, Imperial Protector." Xiao Tian clasped his hands. A trace of regret appeared on General Lu's face when he heard this. However, he also understood that it was indeed a little beneath the status of the Qin Empire's Imperial Protector to attend a banquet like this. Even sending an ordinary Imperial Protector to a banquet like this was giving the kingdom of Jessen enough face. "Imperial Protector, where should I go to find you?" Xiao Tian asked. "Go to Lore City to find me. I should be staying there for quite some time." Jianqin replied without any hesitation. Lore City. General Lu, who was standing at the side, memorized this name in his heart. Afterwards, Jianqin left with the owner of the inn, Xin Fang and her son. After identifying the people below, he shot off into the air with mixed feelings. 10 years passed like a day. Unknowingly, many years had passed since Jianqin left Changyang Prefecture. Back then, because of the Huayan sect, Jianqin had no choice but to conceal his identity and leave his hometown to flee the kingdom of Jessen. However, no one could have imagined that the weak youth from back then would grow to a level where he could look down on all heroes in just a few short years. He returned with the aura of a king. Jianqin flew at high speed in the air, allowing the fierce winds to blow against his face. All he could hear was the rumbling of the wind, which was deafening. Xin Fang and her son were tightly wrapped in a layer of wind elemental energy. They could only see the ground rapidly receding beneath their feet. Jianqin's expression was very complicated. His eyes were somewhat distracted, and his mind was filled with thoughts. Changyang Prefecture. Do you still remember that there was a fourth young master called Changyang Shoten? Chapter 435. The kingdom of Jessen's Lore City was a first-class city. There were more than a dozen such cities in the kingdom of Jessen, but they were not very famous. There were a total of 4 major powers in Lore City. They were the Changyang Prefecture, the Tianling clan, the Cheng clan, and the Yan clan. These 4 organizations were the most powerful in Lore City. They occupied the north, south, east, and west of the city, respectively. The Changyang clan had the longest history out of the 4, having existed for much longer than the other 3 organizations. It was said that when the Jessen kingdom had just been founded and Lore City had just been built, they had already been stationed there. At this moment, in the Changyang Prefecture, where the 4 clans of Lore City resided, there was a luxurious room. There were a few pots of famous flowers in the room, giving off a faint fragrance that filled the entire room. Just a whiff of it would make one feel relaxed and happy. Inside the large room, a woman in a white dress who looked to be around 30 years old was pacing back and forth restlessly. The woman had an extraordinary temperament, graceful and luxurious. Although she was already over 30 years old, there was still a trace of her beauty that could topple countries. "Fourth sister, are you there?" Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and a soft voice came in from outside. Hearing this, the woman who was pacing around in the room walked over and opened the door. She saw a beautiful woman standing outside the door. She looked like she was in her 30s. "Second sister." Seeing the beauty outside, the woman in the white dress called out softly. Then she stepped aside and invited the second sister in. The middle-aged woman called the second sister glanced at the woman in the white dress and said, "Fourth sister, I've noticed that you've been a bit off lately. Is there something on your mind?" The fourth sister sighed softly. Her expression became very complicated. She said softly, "Second sister, I've been feeling uneasy these past few days. It's hard for me to calm down. Is something going to happen soon?" The second sister stared at the fourth sister for a while, and then she sighed lightly. "Fourth sister, are you thinking about Xiangtian again?" Hearing this, the fourth sister's expression immediately became gloomy. She lowered her head and did not say anything. Her eyes were filled with deep longing and sorrow. There was even a faint layer of hazy mist. Seeing the fourth sister like this, the second sister sighed in her heart. She calmly said, "Fourth sister, don't be too sad. Xiangtian's talent is outstanding. He'll definitely receive the blessings of the heavens. It won't be long before he comes back." Towards the end, the second sister's voice became softer and softer, clearly lacking confidence. Changyang Shoten had left Changyang Prefecture at the age of 15. He had wandered the outside world alone. Moreover, he had to avoid the pursuit of the Huayan sect and the search of large numbers of mercenaries. It was extremely dangerous. It had already been several years since Changyang Shoten had left Changyang Prefecture. During that time, Changyang Prefecture had sent people everywhere to search for Changyang Shoten. However, there had been no news at all. It was as if Changyang Shoten had completely disappeared. No matter how many people the Changyang Prefecture had sent out, there had been no news at all. Currently, everyone in Changyang Prefecture believed that Changyang Shoten had met with a mishap. That was because the Tianyuan continent was just too dangerous. There was slaughter everywhere, even in cities that had garrisons to maintain order. There were many hot-tempered mercenaries who would kill each other. They would fight over the slightest disagreement. There was no reason to speak of. It was all about strength. In such an environment, the chances of a 15-year-old child surviving were extremely slim. Everyone knew this clearly. Second sister's words evoked the bitterness in Bai Yuntian's heart. More and more tears gathered in her eyes. Soon, they burst out of her eyes and flowed down her face. Bai Yuntian's body gently sobbed as she sobbed. "I don't know where Xiang is right now. Will he be able to come back?" Bai Yuntian was extremely worried about whether her son was still alive after not hearing from him for so long. The second sister pulled Bai Yuntian to the bed and sat down. She let out a long sigh and said, "Fourth sister, don't think too much about it. Aren't you and I the same? Mingyue is just too stubborn. Just because she was dissatisfied with the engagement a year ago, she actually ran away from the Changyang clan. Even now, we don't know where that brat is. I'm even more worried than you about her wandering outside by herself. And big sister Linglong. She's probably much sadder than the two of us. Ahu's 4 limbs have been chopped off. In the future, even his most basic needs will be taken care of by others. He's completely a cripple who can't do anything. I really don't know if Ahu can handle such a blow. Even now, I'm still worried that Ahu won't be able to accept this reality after he wakes up, so he'll want to commit suicide." Outside Lore City, a faint, azure speck of light rapidly descended from the sky. It landed in a forest and disappeared. After a few hours of flight, Jianqin finally arrived at Lore City with Shenfang and her son. Jianqin slowly walked out of the small forest and stared blankly at the tall city walls 5 kilometers away. His expression was extremely complicated because that was where his home was, although it had been several years since they had parted. Lore City still maintained its original appearance. The simple walls still had traces of time that were difficult to wash away. Scattered merchants were entering and leaving the city gates. Perhaps it was because of the war, but the number of merchants entering and leaving Lore City was much lower than before. Even the guards on the city gates were made up of old and frail men. The young and strong men had long been dragged to the front lines to fight. Jianqin stared at Lore City with a complicated expression for a long time before slowly walking over with Shenfang and Ken Lil Sen. They did not speak along the way, and the atmosphere was rather gloomy. Now that the war had calmed down, Jianqin brought the two of them into the city without any obstructions. He found an inn and settled them down temporarily before leaving in a hurry. Before long, Jianqin arrived at Changyang Prefecture. The current Changyang Prefecture did not seem to have changed much compared to a few years ago. A pink wall surrounded Changyang Prefecture. A few tall trees stretched over the wall, their lush branches extending outwards as if they were peeking at the scenery outside. Jianqin arrived at the gates of Changyang Prefecture with mixed feelings. He saw that the gates of Changyang Prefecture were tightly shut. There were no guards outside at all. It was even quieter inside. Not a single sound could be heard. It was much more desolate compared to a few years ago. Jianqin immediately released the senses of his soul, enveloping Changyang Prefecture. Everything within Changyang Prefecture was imprinted in his mind. There were very few people in Changyang Prefecture now. There were less than 50 guards scattered around. Over 100 servants and maids were busy. Compared to the thousands of people a few years ago, it was much more desolate. Jianqin also discovered a familiar figure in a pagoda-shaped building in the backyard of Changyang Prefecture. It was the old man who had guarded the armory. Back then, Jianqin could not see through the old man's strength at all. Now, he could easily sense the old man's strength. He was a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master and was also the only Earth Saint Master in Changyang Prefecture. Jianqin arrived at the gates of Changyang Prefecture. He extended his hand and patted the heavy gates, producing a dull sound. Not long after, the heavy gates slowly opened. A middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance poked his head out. He looked at the door suspiciously and asked, "Kid, who are you looking for?" Although the middle-aged man did not know how to be polite, his tone was still polite. Jianqin did not say anything. He pressed his palm against the gate and exerted a little force. The heavy gates, which were only slightly ajar, immediately opened wide, revealing the courtyard of Changyang Prefecture. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The middle-aged man's expression became somewhat ugly. He shouted with a sharp gaze, attracting the attention of a pair of patrolling guards. Jianqin stood there with his head held high. He looked at the scenery of Changyang Prefecture with a complicated expression and murmured, "Do you still remember that Changyang Prefecture had a 4th young master called Changyang Shoten?" A nostalgic look appeared in Jianqin's eyes. Where did this 4th young master come from? What Changyang Shoten? Kid, stop talking nonsense. Who are you? Tell us your name immediately. The middle-aged man shouted with a sharp gaze. At this time, a group of guards came from afar. There were a total of 10 of them, all wearing the same uniform. Except for 3 older middle-aged men, the rest were young men in their 30s. However, when the 3 older guards heard the words Changyang Shoten, their expressions changed. They looked at each other and then immediately left the group and ran over. Their eyes were fixed on Jianqin. One of them said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Have you seen the 4th young master, Changyang Shoten?" There was a hint of urgency in his tone. The 3 older guards had stayed in Changyang Prefecture for a long time and had seen Changyang Shoten before. In addition, Changyang Prefecture had sent out a large number of people to search for Changyang Shoten. The 3 of them happened to be one of those people. Therefore, the 3 older guards were very sensitive to the words Changyang Shoten. Jianqin did not speak. He glanced at the 3 guards and found that he did not know any of them. In fact, among the many guards in Changyang Prefecture, Jianqin did not know any of them. The 3 guards stared at Jianqin's resolute and handsome face. Suddenly, one of them seemed to have thought of something. His eyes flashed, and he stared at Jianqin in disbelief. He exclaimed, "You look so much like the 4th young master. You are the 4th young master, Changyang Shoten." Hearing this, the other 2 guards who had seen Changyang Shoten were shocked. They carefully looked at Jianqin. Although Jianqin had changed a lot over the years, he still retained some of his old appearance. The more they looked, the more they felt that the young man in front of them was the fourth young master of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Shoten. The middle-aged man who opened the door looked at Jianqin with a puzzled expression. He had not been in Changyang Prefecture for long and had never heard of Changyang Shoten's name. Jianqin felt bitter. He had left Changyang Prefecture for too long. A few years had passed, and he thought that Changyang Prefecture had forgotten about him. He did not expect that there would still be guards who recognized him. Chapter 436. Are you really the fourth young master? One of the guards stared at Jianqin and asked again. The other two guards also looked nervous, but their eyes were filled with anticipation. Only the guards behind them, who had never seen Jianqin before, had a puzzled look on their faces. Jianqin nodded with a complicated expression and said, "Yes, I am Changyang Shoten. I didn't expect that after so long there would still be people who recognize me. You really are the fourth young master. It really is the fourth young master. The fourth young master is back." The three guards who recognized Jianqin suddenly became excited. A few years ago, they were sent to find Changyang Shoten and suffered a lot. They ran all over the world to ask for information, but there was no trace of Changyang Shoten at all. It was as if he had evaporated from the world. "Hurry up and tell fourth madam about this." A quick-witted guard immediately ran inside. Jianqin strode over the high threshold and entered Changyang Prefecture with complicated feelings. He walked toward his mother's room. Now that he knew Jianqin's identity, the guard who opened the door no longer dared to stop Jianqin. He then quietly came to the patrolling guards and asked in a low voice, "Brothers, when did our Changyang Prefecture have a fourth young master? Do you know the name Changyang Shoten?" The guards shook their heads blankly. They didn't know about the existence of Changyang Shoten. "I think I heard from my uncle that our master has 4 children, 3 sons and 1 daughter. Apart from the first young master, second young miss, and third young master, there is also a 4th young master. His name seems to be Changyang Shoten, but he left Changyang Prefecture when he was very young. There has been no news of him since then. No one knows where he went," a guard said softly. Hearing this, the guards were slightly shocked. Their gazes toward Jianqin's back changed. In the courtyard of Changyang Prefecture, Bai Yuntian and Yu Fengyan were sitting by the bed and talking with worried expressions. There were obvious traces of tears on Bai Yuntian's face. "Fourth sister, I can understand how you feel. Don't be too sad. Xiangtian is very lucky. Furthermore, you know how smart he is. He will definitely be fine. He is most likely hiding in a secluded place." Yu Fengyan comforted gently. She had said the same thing countless times to Bai Yuntian. Over the years, whenever Bai Yuntian was sad, it would be Yu Fengyan who comforted her. She had said all sorts of comforting words countless times. She could not find anything new. "Fourth madam, fourth madam." Suddenly, a series of rapid knocks came in. The knocks on the door were very loud. There was no doubt that if the knocks were to continue, the door would be broken. The 2 women were startled by the sudden knocks on the door. Yu Fengyan frowned and called out, "Who's making such a ruckus? Where are your manners?" Hearing Yu Fengyan's call, the guard who knocked on the door quivered. He immediately realized how much trouble his actions would bring him. He immediately put down his hand and called out, fourth madam, good news! Great news! Fourth young master is back. Fourth young master is back." Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian did not immediately react when they heard the 4th young master's words. They were clearly stunned. This was because the title 4th young master had not been used in Changyang Prefecture for a long time. It seemed rather unfamiliar. 4th young master, 4th young master, could it be? Yu Fengyan was the first to react. She was immediately shocked, and disbelief filled her face. Xiang. Bai Yuntian also reacted. She immediately let out a cry of surprise and quickly ran over to open the door. At this moment, Jianqin, who was dressed in white, happened to walk into the courtyard. The moment the door opened, he saw a familiar face. His footsteps came to an abrupt halt. At this moment, his entire body seemed to be frozen. He stood there in a daze as he looked at Bai Yuntian in a white dress. His eyes gradually became misty. Bai Yuntian also saw Jianqin, who had just turned the corner. Although Jianqin's current appearance had changed a lot compared to a few years ago, Bai Yuntian, who had watched Jianqin grow up, still recognized that Jianqin was her own flesh and blood at a glance. Mother and son were connected by heart and shared the same bloodline. There seemed to be a thread connecting them. The moment they saw each other, both Jianqin and Bai Yuntian could clearly feel an indescribable feeling. The bloodline that had been separated for so many years was finally reunited at this moment. Bai Yuntian stood at the door and stared blankly at Jianqin's somewhat familiar handsome face. Because of her excitement, her entire body trembled slightly. She could no longer control the tears in her eyes, and they gushed out like a fountain. Yu Fengyan also walked to the door and stood together with Bai Yuntian. But when she saw Jianqin, her expression suddenly froze. She stared blankly at Jianqin, unable to believe the scene in front of her was real. When Jianqin left Changyang Prefecture, he was only 15 years old. In the eyes of the people of Changyang Prefecture, he was still an inexperienced child. Not only did such a young child have to live alone outside, but he also had to face the pursuit of the Huayan sect and the search of mercenaries. His chances of survival were practically zero. Unless he met a benefactor, no one believed that Jianqin could survive, including Yu Fengyan. Not long after Jianqin left, he mysteriously disappeared. Since then, there had been no news of him. Even when the people of Changyang Prefecture sent out a large number of people to search for him, they couldn't find the slightest clue. This confirmed the thoughts in everyone's hearts. Even if he hadn't been captured by the Huayan sect, he had definitely died in the wilderness without leaving behind a corpse. No one would believe that a 15-year-old inexperienced child would have so many methods to protect himself and hide from those experienced veterans. Although Yu Fengyan had used all sorts of reasons to comfort Bai Yuntian, they were all just white lies. In her heart, she didn't believe that Jianqin could have survived. But now, the person who had left without any news for so many years had suddenly returned. His return was so sudden that Yu Fengyan felt that this scene was like a dream. It was somewhat unreal. Jianqin's eyes were faintly filled with tears. He slowly walked to Bai Yuntian's side and looked at her haggard face with incomparable heartache. He softly said, "Mother, your child has returned." Jianqin's voice was somewhat sobbing. After he finished speaking, 2 lines of hot tears uncontrollably flowed from Jianqin's eyes. Bai Yuntian suddenly hugged Jianqin and began to bawl. The emotions that had been suppressed for many years completely erupted at this moment. Xiang, my child, you've finally returned. You've made your mother so bitter. Mother, I'm sorry. Your child has been unfilial. Jianqin also hugged his mother. Both mother and son wept tears of joy. The 4th young master has returned. It's actually the 4th young master who has returned. I didn't think that the 4th young master would still be alive. We all thought that the 4th young master had met with misfortune long ago. In the courtyard, more and more guards rushed over after hearing the news. Some of the guards who recognized Jianqin stood in the distance and sighed. The words that came out from their mouths let the newcomers know that there was still a 4th young master in Changyang Prefecture. Yu Fengyan finally accepted this dreamlike situation. Looking at the mother and son who had reunited, she also felt very happy in her heart. She said, "Xiangtian, second aunt, is also very happy that you've returned safely. All right, you two should go inside and talk." Subsequently, Jianqin, Bai Yuntian, and Yu Fengyan all entered the house at the same time. The mother and son who had been separated for several years had finally reunited. Naturally, they had a lot to talk about in Changyang Prefecture. The news of the fourth young master's sudden return after being away for several years was spread by several guards. This matter caused an uproar in Changyang Prefecture and alarmed everyone. Even Jianqin's eldest aunt Linglong and third aunt Bai Yushuang knew of this news. Although they were very surprised, the two of them did not visit Jianqin. Linglong was incomparably heartbroken because of what had happened to her child, Changyang Hu. She had become somewhat absent-minded and did not have the heart to care about this issue. Third aunt Bai Yushuang and Jianqin did not have a good relationship to begin with. Jianqin's return not only did not make Bai Yushuang happy in the slightest, but also made her brows knit together. Jianqin stayed in his mother's room and told her everything that had happened after he left Changyang Prefecture. However, Jianqin also knew his limits and concealed many things. Some shocking news. Jianqin did not intend to tell his mother yet. Even if he did, his mother would not believe him. It was better to gradually reveal it in the future and give his family a bigger surprise. Jianqin stayed in Bai Yuntian's room all the way until evening and did not come out. The mother and son seemed to have endless things to talk about. At this moment, outside Changyang Prefecture, a large group of people riding various kinds of magical beast mounts suddenly appeared. Most of them were strong men with strong waists and strong backs. They exuded a murderous aura and were imposing. There were about 700 to 800 people, and they lined up neatly in a long line. The group of people stopped outside Changyang Prefecture. Then, two men immediately stepped forward and pushed open the heavy gate of Changyang Prefecture. They shouted, "Master's back. Come out and welcome him." Changyang Ba, who was riding a rank for magical beast mount, dismounted and tidied up his somewhat messy clothes. Then he held his head high and strode into Changyang Prefecture. Behind him, groups of strong men also dismounted and quietly followed behind Changyang Ba. Just as Changyang Ba entered the mansion, a guard came up to him with a happy face and respectfully said, "Master, good news. Fourth young master is back." Chapter 437. Just as Changyang Ba entered the mansion, a guard came up to him with a joyful expression and said, "Respectfully, Master, good news. The fourth young master is back." Hearing this, Changyang Ba's expression froze for a moment. The term fourth young master had not been heard in Changyang Prefecture for many years. Now that he heard it, it felt a little strange. However, Changyang Ba quickly reacted. His eyes shone brightly as he stared sharply at the guard and exclaimed, "What did you just say?" "Master, the fourth young master is back. The fourth young master is back." The guard spoke again with a hint of excitement in his voice. Changyang Ba's expression became sluggish. His face was full of disbelief. His fourth son, Changyang Shoten, had left Changyang Prefecture for many years. During this time, there was no news at all. In Changyang Ba's heart, he had thought more than once that he would never see his fourth son, who was exceptionally talented since he was young. Because of this, he had been sad many times. Now his fourth son, who was supposed to be dead in his heart, had actually returned. Moreover, his return was so sudden. Changyang Ba, who was not mentally prepared at all, found it hard to accept this fact in a short period of time. It was very hard to believe this fact in front of his eyes. "Is what you said true? Xiang is really back?" Changyang Ba stared sharply at the guard. His voice trembled as he spoke. There was a hint of eagerness and hope in his voice. "Master, this is absolutely true. Fourth Madam and Second Madam have confirmed the fourth young master's identity." "It can't be fake," the guard said. Hearing that the fourth young master, who had left for several years, had miraculously returned, the group of guards behind Changyang Ba all revealed a look of astonishment. They all looked at each other in surprise. Many of them were senior figures in Changyang Prefecture. They all knew what had happened to the fourth young master. In their hearts, everyone thought that the fourth young master was no longer in this world. No one would have thought that the fourth young master, who had not been heard from for several years, would suddenly return. Where is Xiang? Changyangba was very excited and asked eagerly. He was very concerned about his fourth son, who had shown extraordinary talent since he was young. After all, he was his biological child. The fourth young master is in fourth madam's room, the guard quickly replied. Changyangba's figure flashed and disappeared. He quickly rushed to Bai Yuntian's room. At this moment, Jianqin, his mother, and second aunt, Yu Fengyan, were still talking in the room. Almost all of the topics revolved around how Jianqin had survived in the outside world. Although Jianqin had deliberately downplayed many of the moments of life and death, the two women still felt a burst of fear and trepidation. Bai Yuntian, because she felt sorry for her son, didn't know how much tears flowed out of her eyes. Her clothes were wet and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. The two women were both experienced people and knew very well just how chaotic the outside world was. The two of them really couldn't imagine Jianqin wandering the outside world alone, fighting against the bloodthirsty and savage magical beasts in the magical Beast Mountain Range. Just how much suffering and how many life and death situations had he faced? And as Jianqin's mother, Bai Yuntian, even felt like her heart was about to break. Bang! Suddenly, the closed door was rudely opened. Changyangba appeared at the door. His complexion and excitement swept through the room. Soon, his eyes were fixed on Jianqin. Husband! Husband! Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian both stood up and spoke in succession. Changyangba seemed as if he didn't hear them at all. His eyes were firmly fixed on Jianqin. His expression was very excited, and his eyes quickly filled with a mist. Although Jianqin had changed a lot, Changyangba still recognized his son at a glance. Jianqin also looked at Changyangba with a complex and excited expression. The father and son looked at each other for a while. Jianqin opened his mouth slightly and said softly, "Father!" Changyangba's body trembled violently when he heard this. He slowly walked into the room and arrived before Jianqin. He carefully examined Jianqin from head to toe before gradually revealing a smile. "Xiang, you've grown up." Two streams of tears flowed from Changyangba's eyes. Although Jianqin and Changyangba hadn't seen each other for a few years, they didn't talk much. Changyangba did things swiftly and decisively. He stayed in the room for a while before leaving Jianqin, his mother, and Yu Fengyan in the room. The war had just ended, and the guards of Changyang Prefecture had just returned. As the head of the family, Changyangba still had a lot of things to do and was very busy. With the return of hundreds of guards and some important figures of Changyang Prefecture, the originally quiet Changyang Prefecture suddenly became lively. Lights were lit everywhere. Many houses that had been empty for a long time were also lit. At the same time, the news of the return of the fourth young master of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Shoten, quickly spread throughout the residence. Now, even the hundreds of guards and important figures of Changyang Prefecture who had just returned knew about this matter. They were all very surprised. Jianqin stayed in his mother's room until late at night before leaving. Accompanied by his mother, he returned to the house where he used to live, accompanied by two servant girls. Although Jianqin had not returned for a long time this year, the house where he used to live still maintained its original appearance. There were servants cleaning it every day, and it was spotless. The furnishings in the room were also the same as before. "Xiang, it's getting late. You should rest well," Bai Yuntian said to Jianqin with eyes full of affection, looking reluctant to part. Jianqin nodded slightly and said, "Mother, you should also go rest." Then Bai Yuntian left Jianqin's room, leaving the two servant girls to serve Jianqin. "Fourth young master, let us servants help you change," one of the servant girls said softly. Looking at Jianqin's handsome and resolute face, the two servant girls' faces were slightly flushed. The two servant girls were about 18 to 20 years old. Although their appearances could not be considered to be devastatingly beautiful, they were still very beautiful. Even in a first-class city like Lore City, they were still very rare. After all, Chongyang Prefecture was one of the 4 great families. It was powerful and had a noble status. How could it be that just anyone could enter? Jianchen looked at the white room with a face full of nostalgia. Without turning his head, he said, "Both of you can leave. I want some peace and quiet. If there is nothing important, don't disturb me." "Yes," the 2 servant girls replied respectfully and left at the same time. There was a trace of disappointment in their eyes. Jianchen was not only the 4th young master of Chongyang Prefecture with a noble status, but he was also very handsome. Among these servant girls who thought that they were good-looking, who wouldn't want to have a little interaction with such a person and become a phoenix? Jianchen stood in the middle of the room and looked at the familiar furnishings and furniture in the room with a face full of nostalgia. He couldn't help but recall every detail of his life in Chongyang Prefecture when he was young. The scenes of the past were like a picture scroll that slowly replayed in Jianchen's mind. For a moment, Jianchen's heart was filled with emotions, and it was difficult for him to calm down. "Home, this is home. This is my home. I'm home," Jianchen murmured with a stupefied expression. However, he felt a burst of bitterness in his heart. He had waited for this day for a very long time. He had looked forward to this day for a very long time. In the past, he didn't know how many times he had imagined this scene in front of him. Now that the wish in his heart had finally come true, it was very difficult for him to calm down. For himself to be able to return to Chongyang Prefecture and reunite with his family. Jianchen had sacrificed too much and put in too much effort. He had walked on the edge of life and death more than once. He had even lost his life once. If it weren't for the purple and green sword spirits saving him, he wouldn't be alive in this world right now. It would be impossible for him to stand here. He had used his own blood to pave the way home. Thinking back to everything he had experienced after leaving Chongyang Prefecture, Jianchen's heart was filled with a myriad of emotions that were difficult to describe. In the end, 2 crystal-clear teardrops fell from his eyes. Woo-woo! As if it had sensed Jianchen's feelings, the white tiger on his shoulder reached out its 2 front paws and hugged Jianchen's neck. Its furry little head constantly rubbed against Jianchen's face as it let out a whimper, as if it was comforting Jianchen. Jianchen slowly walked to the bed that had once accompanied him for a long time. In the end, without him knowing, he fell asleep in a daze. That night, Jianchen slept very well. He slept very soundly and peacefully. This was the first time he had slept in the years that he had left. At the same time, it was also the most comfortable sleep he had had since he was young. He didn't have to be vigilant all the time like he had been in the past. The white tiger didn't fall asleep. Instead, it lay quietly beside Jianchen. Its furry little head kept turning around, and its bright big eyes blinked as it looked around. "Xiang, are you awake?" The next morning, Jianchen didn't wake up from his deep sleep until his mother, by Yuntian, called from outside the door. He felt refreshed and energetic. At this moment, Jianchen felt that he had never felt so relaxed and happy before. Was this the feeling of returning home? "Xiang, did you sleep well last night?" Bai Yuntian exuded a motherly radiance. She looked at her child with a doting expression and asked with concern. Jianchen's sudden return made Bai Yuntian's mood very happy. She was full of energy, and it was obvious that she had rested well. Jianchen and his mother exchanged a few words casually before the 2 of them left at the same time. They walked towards the dining hall and prepared to eat breakfast. Walking with his mother, Bai Yuntian, on the way to the dining hall, Jianchen felt like he had returned to the scene a few years ago. Every morning, his mother would lead him to eat breakfast together. His days were very warm. When Jianchen and his mother arrived at the dining hall, his second aunt, Yu Fengyan, and third aunt, Bai Yushuang, were already eating breakfast. Beside Bai Yushuang sat a young man in luxurious robes. He seemed to be around the same age as Jianchen. He was Jianchen's 3rd brother, Chongyang Ku. After not seeing each other for a few years, Jianqin's two aunts hadn't changed much. However, Changyang had become somewhat frail. His eyes flickered with shrewdness, and he also had a handsome appearance. Although he couldn't compare to Jianqin, he was still a dragon among men. Chapter 438. Hearing Yu Fengyan's words of praise, Bai Yuntian revealed a trace of a smile on her face. She was very fond of this son of hers. Bai Yushuang looked at Jianqin with an unsightly expression. Frowning, she said, "Xiangtian, why did you suddenly return when you were hiding outside? The Huayan sect is not something our Changyang prefecture can provoke. You're just adding trouble to our Changyang prefecture." Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian's expressions both changed. Bai Yushuang's words clearly had a great opinion of Jianqin's sudden return, as if she hoped that Jianqin would never return. His third aunt's words made Jianqin feel extremely unhappy. He felt a little angry. Just as he was about to speak, he heard his second aunt, Yu Fengyan's voice. "Third sister, your words are a bit too much. Although the Huayan sect is powerful, our Changyang prefecture is not so easy to bully. Furthermore, our clan still has Changbo. I'm sure you've already heard the news of Changbo killing several Heaven Saint Masters at the northern fort. As long as Changbo is present, the Huayan sect won't dare to do anything to our Changyang prefecture. Xiangtian has already left his home for many years because of this matter. He's suffered a lot outside. Now that he's returned safely, we should all be happy instead of treating him coldly." Bai Yushuang coldly snorted and said in a strange tone, "Xiangtian has never been obedient since he was young. He likes to cause trouble everywhere. A few years ago he even injured my Kur. After that, he didn't stay in Kargath Academy for long before offending the Huayan sect. Now that he's returned so suddenly, who knows what kind of power he's provoked outside." Yu Fengyan and Bai Yushuang's expressions changed once more. They had never thought that Bai Yushuang would have such a great opinion of Jianqin. Jianqin was also a little angry. His eyes flashed, and his gaze turned sharp like an unsheathed sword. Bai Yushuang didn't dare to look him in the eye. "Third aunt, I know you have a lot of opinions about me, but I hope you don't have to worry about me. As long as I cause trouble, I will naturally solve it. I will definitely not drag the family down." Jianqin said in a deep voice. "You." Bai Yushuang looked at Jianqin with disdain and said, "Good. Let's see what you've learned these years. I hope you can really deal with the Huayan sect on your own. Don't bring trouble to the family. I will naturally take revenge for the Huayan sect." Jianqin expressionlessly said with a serious expression. In Bai Yushuang's eyes, Jianqin's current appearance was an arrogant and condescending attitude. She immediately revealed a disdainful expression and mocked. "Xiangtian, it's not that I'm scolding you, but before saying such words, why don't you think about what kind of power the Huayan sect is? Have you already forgotten what happened a few years ago? You think you can contend against the Huayan sect? Dream on." Jianqin slightly lowered his head as a cold light flickered in his eyes. Bai Yushuang's attitude made Jianqin extremely angry. However, she was still his aunt and his elder. Jianqin did not want his relationship with his family to become too strained as soon as he returned home. He greatly treasured this family that had not been easy to come by, so he remained silent. His current status was completely different from a few years ago. Not only was he a Heaven Saint Master with a limitless future, he was also the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires of the continent. With such a status, there was no need for him to bicker with an ordinary person. However, Jianqin had already remembered Bai Yushuang's attitude towards him. "Third sister, you're not young anymore. Why do you have to make things difficult for a child?" Yu Fengyan frowned, extremely angry inside. "What do you mean by making things difficult? I'm just speaking the truth." Bai Yushuang glanced at Yu Fengyan, not backing down at all. Yu Fengyan was quite angry. Her chest heaved as she angrily glared at Bai Yushuang. "Third sister, you dash! Second aunt, don't say any more. Jianqin interrupted Yu Fengyan before coldly staring at Bai Shuang. His sharp gaze made Bai Shuang feel uncomfortable as a sliver of fear appeared in her heart. In the end, she looked away. She actually did not dare to meet Jianqin's gaze. Third aunt, I respect you as my senior. I can overlook your disrespect today, but please remember everything you've said. I hope you won't regret it in the future. Jianqin emphasized every single word. Oh, look. You're actually threatening me. Bai Shuang immediately seized the opportunity and clenched her teeth. She placed her hands on her hips and pressed on. Regret? Regret what? Changyang Shoten, do you want to use your own methods to teach your third aunt a lesson? Look, what kind of child is this? Not only does she not respect her seniors, but she's even speaking so arrogantly. She's completely out of line. Yu Fengyan and Bai Shuang's faces turned ashen. Anger surged in their eyes. At this moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out. Haha, why is it so lively today? Everyone's so happy. Changyangba walked in with a majestic gait. There was a faint smile on his face. He seemed to be in a very good mood. Changyangba was a middle-aged man in his 40s. However, from his appearance, he only seemed to be in his 30s. Even though he was already middle-aged, his face still retained the handsome features of his youth. He unconsciously gave off the unique aura of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. Husband. Father. Several people in the dining hall immediately called out. Changyangba seemed to be in a very good mood today. As soon as he walked in, his gaze fell on his fourth son, Jianqin. He carefully sized him up, and the smile on his face grew wider. In his eyes, his fourth son was definitely not an ordinary person. He was destined to be a dragon among men. Even with his pleasant eyesight, he could not see through him. This made Changyangba feel both surprised and happy. In the end, he could not help but laugh to his heart's content. With a son like this, what more could a father ask for? After calming down, Changyangba sat down beside Jianqin and said, Xiang, I've wronged you these years. This short sentence warmed Jianqin's heart. He replied, It's not wronged at all. This child has learned a lot in these years. Good. Xiang is a real director. Changyangba said good 3 times. There were no other words to express the joy in his heart. Looking at Jianqin's calm and resolute face, he felt gratified. This was because he knew that his youngest son had truly grown up. Seeing Changyangba so concerned about Jianqin, Bai Shuang immediately showed an unhappy expression. However, Changyangba's attention was focused on his fourth son, so he naturally did not notice Bai Shuang's expression. In the blink of an eye, Changyangba seemed to have thought of something sad. The joy on his face disappeared, replaced by grief. He sighed and said, It's a pity, ahuhi. Hearing this, Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian both sighed inwardly. They felt sad for Changyang, whose misfortune. Jianqin immediately thought of his big brother, Changyang Hu. His expression also became sad. He said, Father, this child wants to visit big brother. Changyangba gently shook his head and lowered his head in silence. Jianqin could understand his father's distress. How could he not feel the same? He and his big brother, Changyang Hu, had a very good relationship. Now that Changyang Hu had encountered such a situation, Jianqin also felt very sad. Father, this child knows about big brother's situation. Don't worry, big brother will recover. He'll be as good as new, Jianqin comforted. Changyangba shook his head and sighed. That's easier said than done. Only a Class 7. Radiant Saint Master has the ability to regenerate. On the Tian Yuan continent, let's not even talk about how rare Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters are and how difficult it is to find one. Even if we do find one, we won't be able to invite them. People at that level are already beyond our reach. Jianqin also understood just how great a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master status was. They were supreme existences on par with saint rulers, coupled with the fact that radiant saint masters were extremely rare on the Tianyuan continent, and it was extremely difficult to break through. It was not as easy to break through as fighters. This made Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters even more exalted. "Father, this child wants to visit Big Brother," Jianchen said again. "All right." Changyangba agreed to Jianchen's request. Without eating, they immediately hurried to Changyanghu's residence. Jianchen's mother and 2 aunts followed behind them. Jianchen followed behind Changyangba and entered Changyanghu's room very soon. Changyang, who was currently lying on the bed without moving, his eyes were lifeless as he stared blankly at the ceiling. He did not move for quite some time. 4 blood-soaked, white bandages were tied around the joints of his 4 limbs. Changyanghu's mother, Linglong, sat beside the bed in a daze. Her hair was disheveled, and her complexion was haggard. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her delicate face was covered in tears. It was obvious that she had not washed her face in several days. "Madam, I beg you, eat some food. You haven't eaten for several days already." Beside Linglong, several maids cried out with tears in their eyes. In their hands were food that had almost turned cold, as well as toiletries. Chapter 439. Jianchen slowly walked to the bedside and looked at Changyanghu with concern. He softly called out, "Big brother, do you still recognize me? I'm your 4th brother, Changyang Shoten." Hearing this, Changyanghu's originally empty eyes gradually regained some life. He slowly turned his gaze to Jianchen and quietly stared at Jianchen's somewhat familiar face for a while. His expression gradually revealed a trace of excitement, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. He said in a hoarse voice, Fourth brother, you're finally back." Jianchen smiled. He and Changyang, had a close relationship since childhood. Now that they were brothers, Jianchen felt a burst of excitement in his heart. Jianchen turned to look at the group behind him and said, "Father, elder aunt, I have something to say to Big Brother alone. Can you leave us alone for a while?" Changyangba nodded slightly and said, "Xiangtian, you should comfort your big brother." With that, Changyangba led Jianchen's 2 aunts out of the room. Only Changyanghu's mother, Linglong, was still sitting there in a daze as if she had lost her soul. Jianchen came to Linglong and comforted her. "Elder aunt, don't worry. I will make Big Brother better. Let me persuade Big Brother. I have a way to cheer him up. The premise is that everyone needs to leave us alone for a while." Hearing this, Linglong's eyes regained some life. She raised her head and looked at Jianchen's face that had changed a lot in the past few years. Then, she reached out her trembling hand and grabbed Jianchen's hand. She sobbed, "Xiangtian, Elder Anne is begging you. You must persuade your big brother. You must let him live. Elder Aunt is begging you." Linglong's face was full of pleading. She knew that her son had fallen to this point and had lost the courage to continue living. He could not take care of himself and needed others to take care of him. Living like this was simply worse than death. It was an incomparably painful torture. Jianchen solemnly nodded and said, "Elder Aunt, don't worry. I will definitely not disappoint you." Jianchen's voice was full of confidence. Jianchen's confident appearance made Linglong feel as if she had grasped onto a life-saving straw. Her originally worried heart finally settled down a bit. She then walked out of the room, leaving Jianchen and Changyang alone. Looking at the familiar face in front of him, Changyang, whose eyes faintly flickered with tears, he could not help but recall the scene in Kargath Academy a few years ago. He still clearly remembered that he had been bullied by the Huayan sect's young master, Chengmingxiang, and had been beaten black and blue. In order to avenge him, his 4th brother had fought against Chengmingxiang and a dozen other students who were not weak. In the end, he had cut off Chengmingxiang's arm and offended the Huayan sect. From then on, he had left home alone. The scene from a few years ago had always been a pain in Changyang's heart. He knew that it was all because of him that his fourth brother had been forced to leave home alone. His fourth brother had fallen to such a state because of him. This made Chanyang feel very guilty in his heart. He was the one who had implicated his fourth brother. His fourth brother had left for a few years without any news. This made Chanyang feel a thought that he did not dare to accept. But now his fourth brother had suddenly returned after leaving home for a few years. This made Chanyang feel extremely excited, as if he had forgotten about his injuries. Jianchen arrived before Chanyang and said, "Big brother, I can understand how you feel. You must pull yourself together. Before long, fourth brother will give you a new lease on life." Hearing this, Chanyang's face became gloomy. He sighed and said, "Fourth brother, you don't understand. To give a new lease on life, you need to be a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master. I will never be able to stand up again in this lifetime." Chanyang's face was ashen. His voice was hoarse, and his eyes were hollow. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell with a single glance that he had lost the motivation to continue living. Jianchen did not say anything. He slowly extended his hands. Suddenly, the radiant saint force in the surroundings gathered towards his hands at an unbelievable speed. Very soon, it formed a ball of bright, milky white light. As the radiant saint force gathered, the milky white light on his hands became brighter and brighter. It became more and more dazzling, dyeing the entire room white. If it were not for the fact that it was daytime and the light outside was extremely bright, the light from the radiant saint force would have been enough to illuminate the entire Chanyang prefecture. Outside the door, Jianchen's mother, Bai Yuntian, stared at the bright, sunny sky in surprise. In the end, her gaze landed on the room that only Jianchen and Chanyang were in. Her eyes were filled with shock, and there was even some shock. What powerful radiant saint force! Who did this? Don't tell me. Bai Yuntian thought inside. She was extremely shocked. As a radiant saint master, she could clearly sense the pulses of radiant saint force in the surroundings. Moreover, the power of the radiant saint force shocked her. She had never seen such powerful and pure radiant saint force before. This was an ability that only a Class 5 radiant saint master possessed. Ever since they had seen Chanyang, Chanyang Ba and his aunts had all become very grief-stricken. As a result, none of them noticed the changes in Bai Yuntian's face. In the room, Chanyang stared at the white light in Jianchen's hands in shock. Disbelief filled his face. He obviously recognized the white light as the radiant saint force that only radiant saint masters could control. Jianchen slowly pressed down with his hands. Dense, radiant saint force enveloped Chanyang, whose entire body. Under such dense and pure radiant saint force, Chanyang experienced a pleasure that he had never experienced before. His entire body was filled with indescribable comfort. This was a feeling that low-level radiant saint masters could never give him. This lasted for around 10 minutes. Only then did Jianchen slowly lower his hands and stop controlling the radiant saint force. With the nourishment of Jianchen's radiant saint force, Chanyang, whose slightly pale complexion, completely recovered. Even the wounds on his limbs had completely healed. In just 10 minutes, he had achieved results that low-level radiant saint force could never achieve. Chanyang, shock could no longer be described with words. He stared at Jianchen in disbelief, unable to say anything for quite some time. Jianchen sat down by the bed and looked at his brother's shocked gaze. A rare sliver of complacency appeared on his face. He said, "Brother, you might not know this, but your fourth brother is not only a fighter, but also a radiant saint master. He's a Class 6 radiant saint master, only a step away from Class 7. It won't be long before your body recovers." Chanyang, suddenly became emotional. Tears had already gathered in his eyes. He said with a trembling voice, "Fourth brother, is what you said true? Are you really a Class 6 radiant saint master?" At that moment, Chanyang, withered heart suddenly became filled with vitality again. Jianchen smiled. "Brother, haven't you sensed it yet? The Radiant Saint force I control is much more powerful than the Radiant Saint Masters you've seen in the past. Brother, don't worry. Before long, I'll be able to revive you and turn you back into a normal person. You have to live on and wait for that day to come. Changyang, whose excitement could no longer be described with words. Jianchen's words made him give up on his suicidal thoughts, giving him the motivation and hope to live on. He said with a trembling voice, "Fourth brother, don't worry. I'll definitely wait for you. I'll definitely live on well." Seeing his brother walk out from the shadow of death, Jianchen also smiled happily. Afterwards, he called in the group of people waiting outside. As soon as Changyang Ba and his aunts entered, they discovered to their surprise that Changyang, who had suddenly become spirited, he was in high spirits. His previous gloominess had vanished, which surprised them. They wondered just how Jianchen had enlightened their brother. Bai Yuntian stared at her child deeply. Her eyes were filled with love, and there was a sense of separation. "Ahu, are you all right?" Ling Long also noticed her son's change. She leaned on the bed and asked in concern, seeing his mother's haggard face. Changyang, who could not help but cry. He sobbed, "Mother, don't worry. I'm fine now. I'll definitely live on well." Hearing this, Ling Long finally let go of a large stone in her heart. She leaned on the bed and began to bawl. At this moment, a group of over 1,000 people majestically entered Lore City. Quite a few yellow banners fluttered in the wind, with the words Huayan Sect written on them. The battle had just ended, and the various large powers that had helped the kingdom of Jessen on the front lines had all retreated. The Huayan Sect's group had also just returned from the southern forts. On the way, they passed through Lore City and hurried towards the Huayan Sect. The middle-aged man at the front was the Huayan Sect's current sect master, Cheng Fei. He was also Cheng Mingxiang's father. At this moment, a person wearing black robes quickly ran over from the distance. When he approached the Huayan Sect's group, he was immediately stopped by two people riding magical beast mounts. The Huayan Sect's sect master, Cheng Fei, clearly recognized that person. He said, "Let him come over." The two middle-aged men wearing the Huayan Sect's robes immediately moved aside. The black-robed person quickly ran over to the Huayan Sect's sect master and whispered something in his ear. Afterward, a gleam of light flashed through Cheng Fei's eyes. His gaze immediately became piercing as he yelled out, "Changyang Shangtian has actually returned. Is that true?" "It's absolutely true," the man in black said with a serious face. Cheng Fei's eyes flashed, and he waved his hand. He shouted, "Change direction. Go to Changyang Prefecture." Chapter 440. Changyang Prefecture. Jianchen and the others were still in the room, comforting Ling Long and her daughter when a voice rang out from outside. "Family head, this subordinate has an extremely urgent matter to report." Changyang Ba used his eyes to indicate for a maid to open the door. As soon as the door was opened, an old man who looked like a housekeeper quickly walked in with a flustered expression. He urgently said, "Family head, something bad has happened. A large group of people from the Huayan sect is currently approaching our Changyang Prefecture." Hearing this, Changyang Ba's expression changed slightly. He waved his hand to have the housekeeper leave. His brows were tightly knitted together as he said in a heavy voice, "I reckon that news of Xiang Er's return has already been leaked. They are coming for Xiang They still haven't forgotten about the matter from several years ago." Apart from Jianchen, everyone's expressions changed. Bai Yuntian's face was even somewhat pale. She hastily walked over and tightly held onto Jianchen's hand. Her expression filled with worry. The two of them had been separated for several years. Now that they had finally reunited, Bai Yuntian could not bear for Jianchen to once again wander about by himself. Jianchen could clearly feel that his mother's hand was constantly trembling, causing him to involuntarily feel pain in his heart. He softly said, "Mother, don't worry. There won't be a time for this child to do that." "Husband," quickly called Changbo over. We've already heard about how Chang Bo displayed his might at the northern fort. With Chang Bo present, even if the two experts from the Huayan sect personally come, they won't dare to act rashly, Yu Fengyan hastily said, her expression filled with worry. Changyang Ba shook his head. Chang Bo and all the Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Jessen are currently receiving the Qin Empire's imperial advisor. This is the best opportunity for us to establish a relationship with the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire. No one will give up on this rare opportunity. I believe that Chang Bo won't be returning anytime soon. What do? Our Changyang Prefecture only has one Heaven Saint Master, Chang Bo. Now, that Chang Bo isn't here. How are we going to deal with the Huayan sect? Right now, the Huayan sect is already in Lore City and will arrive in Changyang Prefecture very soon. There isn't much time left. Yu Fengyan's face was filled with worry. Although Jianqin was not her son, she was also extremely concerned about Jianqin, treating him as if he was her own child. Second aunt, you don't need to worry. I will deal with the Huayan sect, Jianqin said. Foolish child, don't speak nonsense. The Huayan sect is powerful. How can you deal with them? Bai Yuntian softly said as she looked at Jianqin with a doting gaze. Her hands were tightly wrapped around Jianqin's arm, afraid that Jianqin would leave again like he did a few years ago. Mother, your son is no longer afraid of the Huayan sect. Jianqin defended himself. The warmth of his family had melted Jianqin's heart. He seemed to have become a child, completely concealing the imposing aura he possessed outside. Changyang Ba said, Xiang, you don't need to worry. Our Changyang Prefecture has obtained a precious secret codex, and our strength has greatly increased compared to a few years ago. Although we have lost quite a few people on the battlefield, the Huayan sect has also suffered quite a few losses. Adding on the fact that you, Chang Bo, have grasped a heaven-class battle skill, our Changyang Prefecture's overall strength is not much weaker than the Huayan sect's. You can stay here at ease. The family will deal with the Huayan sect's matters. Hoof! The Huayan sect is the #1 sect in our kingdom of Jessen. Even the imperial family is afraid of its strength. Xiang Tian cut off the arm of the Huayan sect master's only son, Chengming Xiang. The Huayan sect will definitely not let this matter rest. If our Changyang who doesn't back down, there will most likely be a fierce battle today. That would be very unfavorable for our Changyang Prefecture. In my opinion, we should hurry and let Xiangtian go hide. We don't want to implicate our entire family and cause so many innocent people to die because of him, said Bai Yushuang with a displeased expression. How can we do that? Xiangtian has already been wandering outside for several years. He has suffered so much, barely surviving several times. He has only just returned. How can we be so heartless as to let him leave again? Yu Fengyan immediately said. Bai Yushuang coldly snorted. She stared at Yu Fengyan and righteously said, Open your eyes and see who is standing beside you. Could it be that you don't see such a big living person? No matter what he has experienced outside, isn't he still living well? He has already endured several years, so why would he care about such a small amount of time? If he continues to stay here, he will only cause trouble for our Changyang Prefecture and implicate our entire family. Second sister, I know you are worried about Xiangtian, but I am doing this for everyone's sake. All of you, shut your mouths. Changyang Ba suddenly shouted, shocking everyone. His expression was very ugly as he looked at Bai Yushuang. His face was filled with unconcealable anger as he shouted, Everyone, stop arguing. I have already made my decision. Although the Huayan sect is powerful, our Changyang Prefecture is not so easy to bully. Xianger, you stay here and don't go anywhere. I will immediately go gather people. I want to see just how arrogant the Huayan sect is. Right now, our Changyang Prefecture does not fear them. After saying that, Changyang Ba waved his hand and left. Very quickly, the originally quiet Changyang Prefecture became lively. The people in the room could hear the constant shouts coming from outside, as well as the sound of footsteps. Changyang, whose servants and guards were gathering from all directions. Bai Yuxuang's expression was very ugly as she looked at Jianqin. She coldly snorted. You really are my Changyang Prefecture's star of calamity. Since you were young, you only know how to cause trouble everywhere. Our Changyang Prefecture will sooner or later be destroyed by your hands. Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian's expressions became very ugly. Bai Yuxuang's words were a bit too heavy. Changyang, who was lying on the bed, couldn't take it anymore. He turned his head and stared at Bai Yuxuang fiercely. He said, Third aunt, how can you say that about fourth brother? What happened back then was Cheng Mingxiang's fault. It was not fourth brother's fault at all. Fourth brother went to find Cheng Mingxiang to avenge my useless elder brother. Speaking of which, it was all because of me. If you want to blame someone, blame it on me. Third sister, Ahu is right. What happened back then was not entirely Shangtian's fault. Moreover, Shangtian was able to cut off the arm of Cheng Mingxiang, who had the strength of a great saint, with the strength of a primary saint. Such a powerful strength is rare in our kingdom of Jessen. We should be happy instead of targeting Shangtian like this. Ling Long also spoke. In the past, her attitude towards Jianqin was neither cold nor indifferent. But today, Jianqin had saved her son, which made her feel very grateful. Therefore, her favorable impression of Jianqin had improved a lot. Seeing that the three sisters were standing on Jianqin's side, Bai Yuxuang knew that she would only be asking for a rebuff if she continued. She coldly snorted and left without saying anything. Ling Long came to Jianqin's side and intimately held his hand. She softly said, Shangtian, don't mind her. Don't take your third aunt's words to heart. You don't need to worry about the Huayan sect. With you, Changbo, they won't dare to be too presumptuous. However, this Changbo really hid his strength deeply. I didn't expect him to be so powerful. If it wasn't for the news from the northern fort, none of us would have known. If we had known earlier, you wouldn't have fallen into such a situation a few years ago. It has really been hard on you these years. Now, Ling Long's attitude towards Jianqin had completely changed. Jianqin smiled and said, Don't worry, eldest aunt. The current Shangtian is not so easy to bully. Third aunt will regret it sooner or later. Mother, you underestimate fourth brother too much. Fourth brother's talent has been extraordinary since he was young. He's much more powerful than me. Even I, as his elder brother, am far inferior. Changyang, who chuckled as he lay on the bed. He felt extremely happy when he mentioned this, because he thought of his fourth brother's strength as a Radiant Saint Master. A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master had never appeared in the Kingdom of Jessen, and it was extremely rare on the Tianyuan continent. Ling Long was extremely happy when she saw the happy smile on her son's face. This was because she knew that ever since Jianqin had spoken with Changyang alone, her son had truly given up on seeking death. He had regained the vitality of life and planned to live well. Immediately, her gratitude towards Jianqin became even greater. At the same time, in the imperial palace of the Kingdom of Jessen, the king of the Kingdom of Jessen held a banquet to entertain the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire. There were not many people at the table, only around a dozen. However, aside from the king, everyone else was a peak expert of the Kingdom of Jessen. All the Heaven Saint Masters in the Kingdom of Jessen had gathered here. A banquet of such a high level could not be attended by just anyone. Even the princes and princesses of the Kingdom of Jessen were no exception. During the banquet, all the experts of the Kingdom of Jessen proposed toasts to the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire. All of them were extremely respectful and courteous. They were all doing their best to curry favor with the 5 imperial advisors. Although they were all on the same level, their statuses were completely different. The authority they wielded was incomparable as well. On one hand, those who could become imperial advisors of the Qin Empire were all outstanding individuals. It was difficult for them to find an opponent in the same level as them. They could basically challenge experts who were a level higher than them, coupled with the fact that all 5 of them knew battle skills. Their battle prowess had reached a whole new level. This was the reason why the imperial advisors of the Qin Empire had such a noble status. Esteemed imperial advisors, I thank the Qin Empire for their help. If the Qin Empire needs our help in any way, the Kingdom of Jessin will definitely do our best to help. Although our Kingdom of Jessin is weak, we can still do our best to help, the King of the Kingdom of Jessin said. The 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire all spoke politely with smiles on their faces. Since the 5 of them didn't know the relationship between the imperial protector and the Kingdom of Jessin, they didn't dare to offend anyone in the banquet. If they offended someone who was related to the imperial protector, they would be in serious trouble. The 5 of them followed Jianqin from the Qin Empire to cultivate a good relationship with Jianqin. None of them wanted to make a mistake in this matter. Chapter 441. At this moment, the principal of Kargath Institute, Kafir, suddenly spoke up. Esteemed state advisors, this one has a question that I hope you can answer. Back at the northern stronghold, this one seems to have heard that your empire's imperial protector came to save us. May I know which senior this imperial protector is? Would you be able to leak this information to us? Perhaps this senior knows our Kingdom of Jessin. Hearing this, everyone's eyes focused on the 5 state advisors of the Qin Empire. Kafir asked the question that was on everyone's mind. This was because they also wanted to know who this imperial protector that saved the Kingdom of Jessin was, and what his relationship with the Kingdom of Jessin was. The 5 state advisors of the Qin Empire looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. The imperial protector of the Qin Empire had a noble status. If it was anyone else who asked them the name of the imperial protector of the Qin Empire, they would have been dissatisfied. However, they didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction because they wanted to know who the imperial protector was on good terms with as soon as possible. Moreover, this way they could learn more about the identity of the imperial protector. The 5 state advisors of the Qin Empire pondered for a moment before Xiaotian spoke up. Our imperial protector's name is Jianqin. Does anyone here know him? A sliver of confusion appeared in everyone's eyes when they heard Jianqin's name. They had never heard of this name before, so it was extremely unfamiliar. Seeing the expressions on everyone's faces, the 5 state advisors of the Qin Empire looked at each other and felt very confused. With their eyesight, they could tell that no one knew the name of the imperial protector, Jianqin. This made them very curious. Could it be that the imperial protector really had nothing to do with the people of the Kingdom of Jessin? In another magnificent palace of the Kingdom of Jessin, the whole palace was bustling with noise. Many people of different ages were sitting inside and eating and drinking excitedly. Not only were there generals who had just returned from the front lines, but there were also many representatives of the major forces in the Kingdom of Jessin. Everyone was eating and drinking together. The 2 princes of the Kingdom of Jessin even came out personally to toast the generals who had just returned from a victorious battle. Among them, the one who attracted the most attention was a young man in white robes. He didn't look very old, only around 26 or 27 years old. Although he wasn't a noble, almost everyone with status in the hall would personally come over to drink with him. Even the 2 princes of the Jessin Kingdom would occasionally circle around the young man, conversing with him with an amiable expression. They didn't put on the airs of a prince at all. If an uninformed person were to see this scene, they would probably think that they were very close friends. The young man was Ming Dong. He had originally gone to the western fortress with the people of Changyang Prefecture. After the battle ended, he originally planned on returning to Lore City with the people of Changyang Prefecture, but he received an invitation from the Kingdom of Jessin. It was difficult for him to turn down such a great invitation, so he could only force himself to come and participate in the celebration. Jianqin, half a year has already passed. You should have come out from the sacred land of Mercenary City. I'll go to Changyang Prefecture tomorrow and wait for your return. I believe we'll meet again soon. After that, we'll continue to roam the Tianyuan continent as brothers and wipe out all our former enemies one by one, Mingdong secretly thought. He began to reminisce about the days when he had fought alongside Jianqin. Not only did Mingdong feel brotherly love for Jianqin, but he also felt gratitude. This was not only because Jianqin had saved his life, but also because Jianqin had assisted him in his current strength. If it were not for Jianqin, it would have been impossible for Mingdong to come to Mercenary City. It would have been impossible for him to meet his uncle Tian. His fate would have never taken such a drastic turn, allowing him to embark on a path to the heavens. After the celebration, Mingdong temporarily stayed in the imperial palace under the personal invitation of the two princes and the king of the kingdom of Jessen. The 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire lost interest in staying after learning that Jianqin had nothing to do with the imperial family of the kingdom of Jessen. As a result, they left the imperial palace after the banquet, despite the king's attempts to keep them. With the departure of the 5 Qin Empire imperial advisors, the peak experts no longer had any interest in staying either. They all shot off into the sky. Xiao Tian and the 4 others walked through the bustling streets in luxurious robes. Qin Xiaofan asked, "Where should we go next?" "Where do we find Sir Imperial Protector?" "To Lore City," Xiao Tian nonchalantly replied. Before we left, Sir Imperial Protector said that he would be staying in Lore City for quite some time. He told us to go there and find him. All right, but I have a suggestion. It's been a long time since we've come out. Since it's rare for us to come out, why don't we take a stroll? In any case, the war has already calmed down, and with Sir Imperial Protector's strength, he won't encounter any problems. There's nothing for us to do even if we go there, suggested Tianluo. The 4 of them fell silent for a moment before nodding in agreement. Yes, Tianluo is right. It's rare for us to come out, and it just so happens that there's nothing for us to do. Let's take a stroll and see what kind of place Sir Imperial Protector's hometown is for it to give birth to such a genius. Lore City, Changyang Prefecture. A large group of people from the Huayin sect had already gathered at the entrance of Changyang Prefecture. Within Changyang Prefecture, there were also several hundred robust men emitting killing intent. The patriarch of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Ba, was calmly standing in the center of the courtyard, facing the group of people from the Huayin sect. Behind Changyang Ba were several dozen old men. They were all senior figures from Changyang Prefecture. Although their faces were covered in wrinkles, their deep eyes occasionally flashed with a cold light. On the other side, with the sect master of the Huayin sect, Cheng Fei, standing behind him were a dozen expressionless people. Their gazes were cold and as sharp as blades. They were all Earth Saint Masters, and a few of them even had scars on their faces that had yet to heal. Changyang Ba, my Huayin sect doesn't want to become enemies with you. However, Changyang Shoten cut off my son's right arm. This is unforgivable. If you don't give my Huayin sect a satisfactory explanation, we definitely won't let this matter rest. Cheng Fei glared at Changyang Ba, his gaze incomparably cold. Changyang Ba coldly snorted. Cheng Fei, I've already thoroughly investigated what happened back then. It was clearly your son, Cheng Mingxiang, who was in the wrong. He heavily injured me, resulting in what happened afterwards. Cheng Mingxiang only has himself to blame. He can't blame anyone else. If you want to blame someone, blame your son for not being skilled enough. He, a great saint, actually had his arm cut off by someone who had just become a saint. Now that Changyang Prefecture's strength had increased, they no longer feared the Huayin sect. So when facing the Huayin sect, Changyang Ba was filled with confidence and did not back down in the slightest. Cheng Fei's expression also darkened when he heard Changyang Ba's words. He said, Changyang Ba, could it be that your Changyang Prefecture really wants to start a war with my Huayin sect? Although the ancestor is no longer here, my Changyang Prefecture is not a family that can be bullied by others. If you really want to force us, then my Changyang Prefecture will do its best to fight with your Huayan sect. Let's see whether your Huayan sect is stronger or my Changyang Prefecture is stronger, said Changyang Ba, his gaze incomparably sharp. With a single glance, anyone could tell that he was not joking. An old man standing behind Changyang Ba said, "That's right. Although the ancestor is no longer here, my Changyang Prefecture is still not so easy to bully. We can't bury the ancestors' prestige from back then. A few years ago, we already made a mistake. We definitely can't make the same mistake again." Cheng Fei's expression became extremely unsightly. He said, "Have you ever thought about the consequences of offending my Huayan sect? For the sake of Changyang Shoten, you want Changyang Prefecture to be reduced to a small family? Is that worth it?" In Cheng Fei's heart, he did not truly want to have a falling out with the Changyang Prefecture. Because of the matter of the northern fort, he had a clear understanding of Chang Wuji's strength. The one he truly feared was Chang Wuji, not the Changyang Prefecture. With the strength Chang Wuji had displayed, even if two of the Huayan sect's experts joined hands, they might not necessarily be able to win. Even if my Changyang Prefecture is reduced to a small family, your Huayan sect won't be much better off. Changyang Ba coldly sneered. The two sides were in a deadlock for the time being. They both had fear in their hearts because they all understood that the difference in strength between the Changyang Prefecture and the Huayan sect was not very large. Once they started fighting, both sides' strength would definitely be greatly reduced. They might even lose their current status and be reduced to a small family. After about 4 hours of deadlock, a powerful aura suddenly rapidly approached from behind. In the distant horizon, a small red that was rapidly approaching. Soon, it arrived above Changyang Prefecture. It was as if a monarch had descended from the sky, bringing with it an extremely powerful aura. In the end, it stood in front of the Huayan sect's group, facing the people from Changyang Prefecture. This was an old man wearing a fiery red robe. His hair was white, and his face was covered in wrinkles. He looked extremely old. Seeing this old man, the Huayan sect master, Cheng Fei's expression immediately became excited. He asked in disbelief, "And Master, you broke through?" Chapter 442. Master, you've actually succeeded in breaking through. This is wonderful, truly wonderful. Cheng Fei's face was filled with excitement. His master had actually managed to break through to the Heaven Saint Master realm at such a critical moment. With that, the number of Heaven Saint Masters in the Huayan sect would reach 3. They had already surpassed the number of Heaven Saint Masters. With the addition of the imperial family, the Huayan sect would become the number 1 power in the kingdom of Jessen. In Cheng Fei's mind, he had already begun to imagine the future king of the kingdom of Jessen being incomparably courteous to the Huayan sect. Now that the Huayan sect had gained another Heaven Saint Master, the experts standing behind Cheng Fei were all filled with excitement. They all excitedly congratulated Cheng Fei's master. On the other hand, everyone in the Changyang Prefecture had extremely grim expressions. The upper echelons of the Changyang Prefecture all had extremely ugly expressions. Now that the Huayan sect had 3 Heaven Saint Masters, this was definitely not something that the Changyang Prefecture wanted to see. "Saya, I never thought that not only would you not die, you would even break through," an old man from the Changyang Prefecture said in a deep voice. Saya was Cheng Fei's master. He was an old man who had lived for over 400 years. Due to his ordinary talent, he had spent a very long time cultivating to the 6th cycle of Earth Saint Master. Moreover, he had been stuck at the 6th cycle of Earth Saint Master for several decades, unable to comprehend the energy of the world. Now that he was nearing the end of his life, he had unexpectedly broken through to become a Heaven Saint Master at such a crucial moment. This was truly unexpected. Saya laughed heartily. "The heavens have not let me down. Changyang Yinkong, I never thought that you would still be stuck at the same spot. If you don't work hard, you won't have much of a chance." The old man from the Changyang prefecture coldly snorted and no longer said anything. Master, you've come at the right time. My son Qing Mingxiang's arm was cut off by someone from Changyang prefecture. Right now, Changyang prefecture is shielding that person and making an enemy out of my Huayan sect. I hope that master can help my son get revenge. Chang Fei gritted his teeth and said behind Saya, whether or not he could take Changyang Shoten away from Changyang prefecture today depended entirely on his master. Saya nodded slightly. I've also heard about Chang Mingxiang's matter. This concerns the face of our Huayan sect. Don't worry, I will get justice for you. Immediately, Saya looked at the group of people from Changyang prefecture and said, You'd better hand him over quickly. Don't force me to make a move. Otherwise, you should know the consequences. The difference between a Heaven Saint Master and an Earth Saint Master was extremely large. Even if he had only just become a Heaven Saint Master, he was still not someone the Earth Saint Masters from Changyang prefecture could deal with. The faces of the people from Changyang prefecture became unprecedentedly solemn. Even though they were facing an extremely large amount of pressure, Changyang Ba still did not shrink back. He said, You want us to hand him over? That's absolutely impossible. A sharp light flashed through Saya's eyes. He immediately snorted coldly, and the aura of a Heaven Saint Master surged out like a tidal wave, viciously pressing down on the people from Changyang prefecture. Under the pressure of this aura, the great Saint Master and Saint Master guards from Changyang prefecture immediately became pale. They could not help but stagger backwards. Quite a few of the weaker guards even had blood flowing from the corners of their mouths. The aura of a Heaven Saint Master was not something they could endure. Right now, only the dozen or so Earth Saint Masters from Changyang prefecture were able to remain where they were. All of them gritted their teeth and endured. It was clearly very strenuous for them to resist. Although Changyang Ba was the patriarch of the clan, he was only a great Saint Master. As a result, he also retreated to the back with a pale face. In Changyang Hu's room, a strong killing intent appeared in Jianqin's eyes. Although his aunts did not know what was going on outside, Jianqin could clearly see what was going on outside. He definitely could not tolerate the Heaven Saint Master from the Huayan sect acting so unbridled in Changyang prefecture. Jianqin walked out with a gloomy face. However, just as he took a few steps, an arm tightly pulled him back. Immediately after, he heard the familiar voice of his mother, Bai Yuntian. Xiang'er, where are you going? Listen to your mother and stay here. Don't go anywhere. Bai Yuntian's face was filled with worry. In the past, she had been looking forward day and night to finally see her son again. Now, the two of them had only been together for less than a day before the Huayan sect came knocking on their door. This made Bai Yuntian extremely worried that she would lose her beloved son again. Mother, your son is no longer afraid of the Huayan sect. Let me go. Jianqin said. No. Bai Yuntian's reply was resolute and decisive. There was no room for discussion. Her arms were like pliers as she tightly held onto Jianqin's arm. She sorrowfully said, Xiang'er, if you must listen to your mother, then obediently stay here and don't go out. Your father and the others will deal with the Huayan sect. Mother, your son is no longer as weak as he was a few years ago. The Huayan sect's people are unable to harm your son. Jianqin argued. Xiang'er, don't say such foolish things. How could you possibly be a match for the Huayan sect? Just listen to your mother and obediently stay here. Don't go anywhere. Bai Yuntian's voice was filled with pleading. Tears were already flowing out of her eyes. Looking at the pleading expression on his mother's face, Jianqin sighed inside. His heart had completely softened. He couldn't bear to make his mother sad, so he said, All right, mother, I'll stay here and not go anywhere. Outside the courtyard, Saya coldly smiled as he looked at the people from Changyang prefecture who were bitterly resisting his aura. He said in a deep voice, I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to hand him over or not? If you want to take him away from our Chanyang prefecture, then don't even think about it. My Chanyang prefecture's dignity cannot be blasphemed. If you want to start a war, then go ahead, Chanyanba coldly said. Although the sudden appearance of 3 Heaven Saint Masters from the Huayan sect made him feel a lot of pressure, his expression did not reveal the slightest trace of fear. It seems that if I don't make you suffer, you won't become obedient. A sharp light flashed through Saya's eyes. He clenched his hands in front of him, and the fire elemental energy in the surroundings immediately gathered in his hands. He was clearly planning on taking action. Everyone attacked together. The dozen or so Earth Saint Masters from Chanyang Prefecture all roared out. Saint force surged out of their bodies and rapidly condensed into various weapons in their hands. They then all charged at Saya at the same time. The dozen or so saint weapons with surging saint force formed a large net of energy in the air that enveloped Saya. Saya had just broken through to Heaven's Saint Master. Not only was the speed at which he gathered the energy of the world very rusty, it was also extremely slow. Looking at the dozen or so saint weapons that enveloped him, he could only give up on gathering the energy of the world. He immediately took out his own saint weapon and quickly swung it out. He began to fight with the dozen or so Earth Saint Masters from Chanyang Prefecture. As soon as the 2 sides clashed, a powerful shockwave of energy erupted, turning the courtyard of Chanyang Prefecture into a mess. However, Heaven Saint Masters were still Heaven Saint Masters after all. There was an unbridgeable gap between them and Earth Saint Masters. Saya easily repelled the dozen Earth Saint Masters from Chanyang Prefecture by himself. However, the group of old men from Chanyang Prefecture did not stop because of this. They all roared out, and an even more powerful aura erupted from their bodies. Their battle prowess instantly tripled. They then charged at Saya once more. The dozen or so saint weapons enveloped Saya, sealing off all his paths of escape. Sensing the sudden increase in battle prowess of the old men from the Huayan sect, a trace of surprise appeared in Saya's eyes. His face also became much more solemn. The saint weapon in his hand surged with energy as he swung it out with lightning speed, engaging in a great battle with the old men. The sound of weapons colliding continuously rang out. Every time they collided, a powerful shockwave of energy would spread out in all directions, turning the scenery in front of Chanyang Prefecture into a mess. Although the battle was intense, the dozen or so experts from Chanyang Prefecture were actually able to temporarily stop Saya, who was a Heaven Saint Master. Seeing that he was actually being entangled by a dozen Earth Saint Masters in front of so many people from the Huayan sect, Saya felt that he had lost some face. He immediately roared out, "Since you're so stubborn, then don't blame me for being impolite." Saya no longer held back and immediately attacked with his full strength. He completely erupted with the strength of a Heaven Saint Master, directly slashing at the saint weapon in the hands of one of the experts. The powerful force behind the slash caused the expert to vomit blood and fly back. Afterward, the old men from Chanyang Prefecture were all injured by Saya. Blood spurted out of their mouths, and in the blink of an eye, the people who had been evenly matched with Saya were all defeated. Chanyangba's face became extremely ugly. A Heaven Saint Master was far stronger than an Earth Saint Master. Even with a dozen or so people working together, they were still not his opponent. These Earth Saint Masters were already the strongest force that Chanyang Prefecture could bring out. If even they could not stop Saya, then Chanyang Prefecture really did not have any power left to contend against a Heaven Saint Master. Saya coldly smiled as he glanced at Chanyang, Hu, and the old men. Without even turning his head, he said, "Chang Fei, directly send people to capture them. If there are any obstructions, don't hold back." "Yes, Master." The Huayan sect master was overjoyed. He immediately arranged for a group of people to search Chanyang Prefecture. In Chanyang Hu's room, Jinshin's handsome face had already become ashen. The killing intent in his eyes was extremely intense. Just as he was about to break free from his mother's arms and charge out, his face suddenly froze. He gradually calmed down. At this moment, just as the people the Huayun sect master had arranged for were about to enter Changyang Prefecture to search, a long whistle suddenly rang out from the distance. The sound was vast and mighty, spreading across the vast horizon. A fiery red figure was flying over from the distance at an extremely fast speed. The enormous presence he gave off caused the clouds in the sky to violently surge. Saya's face suddenly changed. He said in a low voice, "Oh no, Chang Wuji has returned." Chapter 443. Saya's words caused the expressions of the Huayan sect's experts to change. They were incomparably fearful of Chang Wuji, because they had already heard of Chang Wuji's display of strength at the northern fort. He had used a heaven-tier battle skill to kill 2 Heaven Saint Masters in a row. That kind of battle prowess made them feel fear. Soon, an azure-robed old man flew over from the distance, slowly descending from the sky with a powerful aura. In the end, he stood in front of the Changyang Prefecture's group, blocking the Huayan sect's people. "Changbo, you finally returned." Changyangba looked at the old man with pleasant surprise. He was very emotional. Currently, the Changyang Prefecture only had Changbo as a Heaven Saint Master. If Changbo hadn't returned, then no one in the Changyang Prefecture would have been able to stop Saya. In the end, the Huayan sect would have searched the entire mansion. Not only would they be unable to protect their 4th son, who had just returned, but the Changyang Prefecture would also lose all face. At this crucial moment, Changbo's sudden return was like a life-saving straw for Changyangba. His heart, that had been in his throat, completely relaxed. Even the injured old men let out a sigh of relief. There was finally someone who could deal with the enemy's Heaven Saint Master. Uncle Chang's expression was very unsightly. He glanced at the courtyard that had been destroyed because of the battle. When his gaze landed on more than a dozen pale and injured old men, a strong killing intent involuntarily flashed in his eyes. He asked in a low voice, "Family head, what's going on?" Changyangba walked over and said, "Changbo, yesterday Xiang has suddenly returned. The Huayun sect received the news and specially came to capture Xianger." "What? The 4th young master has returned?" Changbo's face was filled with shock. Ever since Jianqin had left Changyang Prefecture, there had been no news of him. During that time, Changbo had suspected more than once that Jianqin had met with a mishap. However, he never thought that the 4th young master would actually return. Changyangba nodded and smiled. "I don't know where Xiang has been hiding for the past few years. He's been missing for several years, but fortunately, nothing has happened to him. He suddenly returned yesterday. It's good that he's back. It's good that he's back." Changbo's expression was also filled with excitement. Not only had Jianqin displayed outstanding talent from a young age and received Changbo's expectations, but he had also watched Jianqin grow up. Their relationship was not ordinary. Changbo slowly suppressed the excitement in his heart. His eyes returned to their previous sharpness as he gloomily looked at the Huayun sect. He was indescribably furious as he roared, "Although Master is no longer here, my Changyang Prefecture is not a place where anyone can bully. All of you from the Huayun sect, get the hell out of here." Uncle Chang made a grabbing motion in the air, and Yuan Qi gathered at a terrifying speed. Then he pushed out with both hands, and an incomparably powerful energy surged out, forming a powerful shockwave that shot towards the Huayun sect's group. In front of this powerful energy, the Huayun sect's experts were unable to resist at all. They were all blown away, falling out of the door. The dozen or so Earth Saint Masters were unable to resist at all. Even Saya, who had just stepped into the realm of Heaven Saint Masters, found it difficult to resist this powerful energy. His feet left 2 deep marks on the ground as he was pushed out of the door. Changbo's control over this energy was extremely good. It was completely restrained, not causing any damage to the surroundings. He had already stepped into the realm of Heaven's Saint Masters for many years. His strength was not something that a newcomer like Saya could compare to. Saya's expression became very ugly when he saw that he was unable to resist the energy that Chang Wuji had casually sent out. At the same time, he was shocked by Chang Wuji's strength. Chang Bo had always kept a very low profile. He was not even ranked among the top 10 experts of the kingdom of Jessen. Outsiders did not even know about him. Even the guards of Changyang Prefecture did not know that Chang Bo, who was only a housekeeper, was actually a hidden expert. If it were not for the invasion of the 4 countries that exposed his strength, perhaps only the core members of Changyang Prefecture would know about him. Chang Wuji's gaze landed on Saya. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. "I remember that you're called Saya. I never thought that you would have broken through to the realm of Heaven's Saint Master. Since you've injured the people of my Changyang Prefecture, don't blame me for being impolite. The dignity of my Changyang Prefecture will not be blasphemed." As he spoke, Chang Wuji's right hand grabbed at the air. The energy in the surroundings immediately began to surge once more. However, this time he controlled the element of fire, which was known to be the most powerful of the 6 elements. Chang Wuji gathered the elemental energy extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had condensed into a sword of fire. He then threw it at Saya, who was outside the door. Saya's expression immediately changed. He was definitely not Chang Wuji's opponent with his strength as a newly advanced Heaven Saint Master. Without any hesitation, he immediately drew his saint weapon and used his full strength to receive the sword of fire. Boom! With a violent boom, a powerful shockwave of energy erupted outside the door, spreading out in all directions. At the same time, a faint layer of fiery red light appeared outside the entrance of Changyang Prefecture, protecting the walls of the Changyang Prefecture from being damaged by the shockwave of energy. Saya vomited a large mouthful of blood as his face instantly paled. He staggered backwards. Although they were both Heaven Saint Masters, the difference in strength was still too great. He could not even receive a casual attack from Chang Wuji. The disciples of the Huayun sect, who were closer to the entrance of Changyang Prefecture, were also affected. They were all swallowed by the shockwave of fire. Over 100 people were swallowed by the waves of fire. Several dozen people lost their lives in the sea of fire. Only a few people managed to escape, but they were all in horrible condition. Their clothes had been completely burned away. In the blink of an eye, the Huayun sect that had originally held the upper hand had been reduced to such a state because of Chang Wuji's appearance. Chang Wuji's strength was so great that the 1,000 people of the Huayun sect did not even dare to breathe loudly. Their expressions were all extremely ugly. Suddenly, 2 more powerful presences flew over from afar. They approached very quickly and slowly landed outside the main entrance of the Changyang clan. Both of them were old men in their 70s. They wore long white robes, had white hair, and a youthful complexion. Their eyes were bright and full of expression. However, their complexions were very ugly at this moment. Their brows were tightly knitted together. However, the appearance of these 2 old men caused the upper echelon of the Huayun sect to rejoice. They immediately knelt on one knee and called out, "Greetings, Grand Elders!" Over 1,000 Huayun sect disciples all knelt on one knee and called out the same words. Their voices overlapped, forming a huge sound wave that could shake the heavens and earth. It was a spectacular sight. The 2 Huayun sect grand elders frowned at this scene. One of them asked, "Ching Fei, what is going on?" Afterwards, the Huayun sect master told the 2 grand elders everything that had happened. Hearing this, the 2 grand elders sank into a short period of silence. If it was before, the Huayun sect definitely would not have let the Changyang Prefecture treat the Huayun sect in such a manner. They would have long since fought to the death. But because of the matter of the northern fort, Chang Wuji's hidden strength had been exposed. That made the 2 grand elders feel extremely fearful. They no longer dared to look down on the Changyang prefecture like before. Killing 2 Heaven Saint Masters in a row was not something an ordinary person could do. Furthermore, Chang Wuji's Heaven Tier battle skill also gave the 2 Huayan sect great elders a great deal of pressure. One of the Grand Elders looked at Chang Wuji with an unsightly expression and said, "Chang Wuji, you killed several dozen of my Huayan sect's disciples. Aren't you a little too vicious?" Chang Wuji coldly snorted and said, "Not only did your Huayan sect destroy my Changyang prefecture, you even injured several experts of my Changyang prefecture. How do you want to settle this debt?" Chang Wuji strode forward, emitting a powerful battle intent as he pressured the 2 Huayan sect Grand Elders. He seemed ready to fight at the slightest disagreement. The 2 Grand Elders' expressions changed at the same time, but they did not back down. One of them immediately explained, "I also heard about what happened back then. It all started because of Changyang Shoten. Changyang Shoten cut off the right arm of the next sect master of the Huayan sect, Chengmingxiang. If we really want to calculate it, it is your Changyang prefecture's fault. My Huayan sect coming to ask for Chengmingxiang is only natural." Chapter 444. The 2 heavenly elders of the Huayan sect were greatly infuriated by Chang Wuji's words. Chang Wuji's words were basically cursing the next sect master, Chengmingxiang, for being useless. "Chang Wuji, our Huayan sect will remember today's matter. Let's go," one of the Grand Elders said in a deep voice before leading the Huayan sect's people away, their faces covered in dirt. The current Changyang prefecture was no longer the old Changyang prefecture. Because of Chang Wuji, the 2 Grand Elders of the Huayan sect didn't dare to be too impudent. Once they fought with Chang Wuji, even if they worked together, they didn't have absolute confidence in winning. What they feared the most was Chang Wuji's Heaven Tier battle skill. Although the Huayan sect had gained another Heaven Saint Master, he had only just stepped into the Heaven Saint realm. While he could bully a few Earth Saint Masters, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from a veteran Heaven Saint Master like Chang Wuji. The difference between each cycle of Heaven Saint Masters was enormous. Chang Wuji didn't make things too difficult for the Huayan sect. Changyang prefecture's current strength was comparable to the Huayan sect's. If they really fought, both sides would suffer heavy losses. That was something no one wanted to see. "Suda, immediately call people to tidy up the estate," Chang Wuji said to a bald old man behind him. "Yes." The old man called Suda respectfully replied before immediately retreating. He was also the steward of the Changyang prefecture. Changyang prefecture had 2 stewards. Chang Bo was the steward while Suda was the assistant steward. He assisted Chang Bo in managing all the affairs of the clan. Chang Bo arrived in front of the old men and said, "Elders, you should all go and treat your injuries." The old men exchanged a few words before leaving. The several hundred guards of the Changyang prefecture also dispersed under Changyang Ba's orders. In the blink of an eye, everything returned to normal. Only the mess at the entrance was proof of what had happened. After everyone left, Chang Bo lightly sighed. A gratified smile appeared on his face as he said, "I never thought that the 4th young master would still be alive. This is truly something worth celebrating. Patriarch, bring me to see the 4th young master. After not seeing him for a few years, I'm very curious to see just what kind of cultivation his talent has reached." Changyang Ba chuckled. "Xiang'er is in whose room? Chang Bo, let's go." Afterwards, Chang Wuji and Changyang Ba walked towards Changyang Hu's room. Apart from the 3 women, only Jianchen was still standing in the middle of the room. He was very eye-catching. The moment they entered the room, Chang Wuji's gaze immediately fell on Jianchen. His expression immediately froze, and his mouth immediately opened wide. His face was filled with disbelief. Changyang Ba did not notice Chang Bo's expression. Looking at the restless women, he immediately comforted them, The Huayan sect's people have already retreated. Don't worry, Xiang'er is fine. Right now, the Huayan sect won't dare to offend us." Hearing this, Bai Yuntian let out a sigh of relief. Her heart finally relaxed. As for Jianqin's second aunt, Yu Fengyan, and first aunt, Ling Long, the two women also let out sighs of relief. "Greetings, Changbo." Jianqin clasped his hands towards Changbo from afar. Seeing the shock on Changbo's face, the treacherous official also revealed an indescribable smile. Jianqin's call of Changbo caused Chang Wuji to return to his senses. Looking at Jianqin with shock, he said in shock, You really are the fourth young master." Looking at that familiar face, Chang Wuji was extremely shocked. He could not help but recall the scene at the border fortress of the Pingyang Kingdom. An extremely young and mysterious expert had fought against 5 Heaven Saint Masters by himself. In the end, he had personally beheaded 4 of them. The last Heaven Saint Master from the Chang'an Kingdom had also lost an arm and fled miserably. And this mysterious expert's appearance was clearly the same as the person in front of him. Changyang Ba could also hear that something was wrong with Chang Wuji's tone. Looking back at Chang Wuji in confusion, his expression immediately became strange. He really could not understand why the usually calm Chang Bo would suddenly lose his composure like this. "Chang Bo, what's wrong?" Changyang Ba asked in confusion. He was extremely puzzled by Chang Wuji's expression. Jian Chen's mother, Bai Yuntian, and his 2 aunts looked at each other. Their faces were filled with doubt. Uncle Chang's loss of composure had shocked the 3 of them. This was the first time they had seen Uncle Chang reveal such an expression since they had met him. Jianqin faintly smiled and nodded. "Chang Bo, I am Shangtian. Don't you even recognize me?" Impossible. How is this possible?" Chang Bo stared blankly at Jianqin. The mysterious expert who had killed 4 Heaven Saint Masters by himself was actually the 4th young master of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Shoten. This was very difficult for him to accept because when Changyang Shoten ran away from home at the age of 15, he was only a basic saint. Now, only 5 years had passed and Changyang Shoten had already become a Heaven Saint Master. This was just too shocking. "Changbo, what are you saying?" Changyang Ba asked again. He was completely confused by Changbo's words. Uncle Chang took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his shock. He slowly said, "Patriarch, do you still remember when I told you that a mysterious expert had beheaded 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom back in the northern fort?" Changyang Ba nodded and did not say anything. He waited for Chang Bo to continue. Chang Wuji was silent for a while before continuing with a trembling voice. "This mysterious expert was actually the 4th young master." "What?" Changyang Ba immediately cried out in surprise. His face was filled with disbelief as he asked, "Chang Bo, what did you just say?" "The mysterious expert who beheaded 4 Heaven Saint Masters in the Pingyang Kingdom was the 4th young master," Chang Bo said again. He spoke very slowly so that everyone in the room could hear him clearly. As soon as Chang Bo finished speaking, the entire room fell into a strange silence. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jianqin. Even Changyang, who was lying on the bed, turned his head to look at Jianqin. His face was filled with disbelief. Bai Yuntian was the first to return to her senses. She laughed and said, "Chang Bo, I think you've got the wrong person. Xiang is only 21 years old this year. He's not as powerful as you say." Changyang Ba looked at Jianqin and asked with a trembling voice, "Xiang, is what Chang Bo said true? You were the one who beheaded the 4 Heaven Saint Masters in the Pingyang Kingdom?" Changyang Ba's eyes were filled with hope. He also did not dare to believe that his 4th son had such strength. However, he could not help but ask. He also believed that Chang Bo would not speak without thinking. Jianqin nodded and said, "Chang Bo is right. Father, I was the one who killed the 4 Heaven Saint Masters in the Pingyang Kingdom." Jianqin's calm words made everyone in the room speechless. A young man who was not even in his 20s was actually able to kill Heaven Saint Masters. It was truly shocking. How is this possible? Xiang, you were only 15 years old when you left Changyang Prefecture. You had just condensed a saint weapon and became a saint. It has only been 6 years since then. How did you become so powerful? Bai Yuntian cried out in surprise. Her beautiful eyes were wide open. Xiangtian, how did you kill those Heaven Saint Masters? Yu Fengyan also asked in shock. Xiang, just what level of strength have you reached? Even I can't see through you. Changyang Ba's voice trembled. He was unable to hide the excitement in his voice. The joy in his heart had reached an indescribable level. Jianqin pondered for a moment and said, Father, Mother, due to some fortuitous encounters, my path of cultivation has undergone a huge change. I have completely broken away from the hierarchy of the Tianyuan continent. My current strength should be at the level of a Heaven Saint Master because I can already control the energy of the world. Jianqin was unable to accurately determine his own strength. The reason why he could easily kill Heaven Saint Masters was because of the origin energy of the sword spirits. With the origin energy of the sword spirits, Jianqin did not even fear a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master. However, without the origin energy of the sword spirits, Jianqin could only rely on his ability to control everything. It would take him quite a bit of effort to kill a Heaven Saint Master. Heaven Saint Master, Heaven Saint Master. Xiang, have you really become a Heaven Saint Master? Bai Yuntian's heart was filled with great joy. She could not help but tremble. Her son was a Heaven Saint Master. This shocked and excited her at the same time. Jianqin's 2 aunts were shocked as well. They both looked at Jianqin like they were looking at a monster.